The story begins in Silver City, where everyone was busy with their usual routine. Then, they heard screams as a chariot pulled by horses rushed by. Guards surrounded a prison carriage, and the driver yelled for everyone to move. The crowd was asking who was inside, thinking it must be a dangerous new prisoner because of all the guards. People thought whoever it was had finished a lot of people. A couple held hands, and the woman was scared. She was afraid the werewolf could break the steel bars. The man reassured her though. He said the city had two special things, a big silver mine, and a huge prison made of silver ore in the mountains outside the city. The silver prison had spells carved on its walls to seal magic, and the overseer was Lord Aiden Galord. It was supposed to be impossible to escape, but deep in the night, a hand broke through the ground outside a brick wall. A girl with blue hair crawled out of the hole, glad to finally be free. This was the Blood Princess Ophelia. She shouted that the warden was crazy to think he could keep her. She had spent 2 years digging a tunnel to escape, and she was annoyed that she hadn't expected the silver foundation. Spreading her arms out, she yelled that the full moon and fresh air were worth 2 years of pain. Then Ophelia's face got scared. A man in a suit and top hat was behind her. He said she shouldn't yell and told her it would be better to come back. She turned around and asked if it was Aiden. He took a photo of her with a flash. This was Aiden, the warden. Ophelia got serious and asked how he knew she had escaped. They stood opposite each other in the forest. Aiden said her escape was logical because she went to the toilet twice a day, but vampires don't need to go. He knew all she could have been doing there was digging a tunnel. Ophelia yelled that she didn't understand why she wasn't caught sooner. The warden showed her the photograph he just took of her scared face. He said the goal was to catch her off guard, because other bad guys would act strange if they knew the Blood Princess was secretly digging a way out. Ophelia showed her fangs and claws and said she hated him. She screamed that only one of them would leave alive. She'd made a mistake 2 years ago when she was caught, but not this time. Something poked her head, and she turned around, confused, asking if it was Evange. Behind Ophelia was a short girl with white hair. This was the notorious brutal assassin Evange. She said Aiden had ordered her to catch Ophelia. A red magic bracelet appeared on Ophelia's neck. A girl with red hair and a witch's hat appeared, stroking a huge hawk. This was Daly, the elder witch. She said Ophelia had dug for too long and she was tired of waiting. Ophelia looked at the two girls and said they were the most powerful women on the continent. Then, a final girl appeared with 2 skeleton assistants and scythes. She was wearing glasses and a blue robe, holding a book. This was the master of necromancer. She asked if she could keep Ophelia's ashes. The skeleton assistants attacked Ophelia, who was surrounded. She asked why they were serving Aiden when he held them hostage. She shouted at them to unite against him, asking if they didn't want freedom like her. The 3 girls looked at her sadly. Aiden stood across from Ophelia and said they had signed a contract. He improved their living conditions, and they had to serve him in return. He told her sternly that he wasn't going to repeat himself, and if she didn't come back voluntarily, she would be injured and returned to the cage by force. Ophelia showed her fangs and called him worthless. She stood proudly, arms bent, and shouted that she would rather try for freedom than be put down. She told him not to underestimate her. Aiden said the stakes were high this time. Ophelia imagined being tied to a cross with chains, baking in the sun with garlic in her mouth. Exactly what Aiden had said would happen. Ophelia then pretended to be sweet and said she just wanted to admire the moon, acting like she didn't know why she was being punished. Realizing her trick, Aiden pointed to the hole she had dug. He told her to climb back and not force him to use holy water. Next, the huge doors opened, showing Aiden with a cane and the guards. He was famous for his strength. An image flashed of him in armor on a mountain of fighters, holding a sword and a magic ball. He was known as a genius swordsman and sharpshooter. But one day, he was working with spells and diaries, and that was his last day. A creature from another world was sent to take his body's place. The creature had worked as a prison guard before, making it easy to pretend to be the warden. Aiden and the guards made their rounds through the bright hall of prison cells. The creatures trapped behind bars screamed at him and offered him fights. This was the most dangerous prison, holding powerful women from all over the continent. This scared the new Aiden. A half-girl with animal paws growled at him. A creature with horns said she'd take his soul if she had a whip. A chained zombie woman pulled at her chains. A half-dragon asked Aiden why he didn't come to them. A seductive succubus tried to lure him with sweet talk. A strange creature with blue skin and tentacles muttered in its own language about wanting to catch Aiden. Aiden looked at the creatures and told the guard to turn off the lights. He knew just his name wasn't enough to keep them in line anymore. A voice in a cage said the mountains no longer shook at his name. A woman with gray skin and snakes on her head smiled nastily and said her poison had gotten into the original Aiden's body 3 years ago, and now he was useless. The guards hit the cages with sticks to try and calm the prisoners, but they couldn't. Cries came from everywhere, saying the warden was weak and couldn't stop them if they escaped. The guards shouted for them to be quiet. The angry half-girl yelled that he was weak and challenged him to show his strength. Clenching his fist, which was filled with light, Aiden yelled for everyone to be quiet. Leaning on his cane, he raised his hand, and the whole building filled with blinding white light. The prisoners screamed in pain, Someone yelled that he had rights and would complain. The half-girl quickly apologized, saying she was just joking. Aiden looked distant, thinking he had no real talents or cunning. He had only been able to learn basic spells like that flash in 2 sleepless months. He pointed at the guilty prisoners and shouted for the guards to send them to the punishment cell. Aiden knew any prisoner could tear him apart, so he had to find a way to leave soon, perhaps by getting a lead from one of them. He prayed that no more problem prisoners would be sent to him. A guard opened the door, and Aiden and the guards left. 2 guards were on the floor, their weapons broken. 2 others were trying to restrain a new prisoner. A guard told Aiden that this very loud prisoner had been sentenced to execution. A girl with wolf ears, yellow eyes, and fangs was growling and trying to escape from the guards, angrily cursing those holding her. Aiden sighed heavily. It was the case of the doomed prisoner. The file said the werewolf, Veronica, was a former police officer in Silver City. The guard revealed that during an investigation into counterfeit alcohol, she shot and finished a bar owner and was sentenced to death. A doctor in a mask held a needle, and Veronica was unconscious nearby. He said he had given her a sedative. Aiden asked the doctor to take Veronica to the locker room. The guard started to leave. Aiden turned to the captain, Rosen, and asked him to stay. Aiden held some papers and told Rosen that he had asked for an additional prison cell last month, but there was no answer. The cells were too full, and if it continued, there would be a riot. The captain looked confused, wondering why Aiden, after so many years, didn't understand how things worked. He said there were over 1,000 prisoners in Rose Prison, and the upkeep was too expensive. Most of them lived for thousands of years, and it was a tough situation. Aiden didn't understand what that had to do with anything. Rosen then said that a group of prisoners had died under strange circumstances, which meant they didn't need to be kept, and that was good news. Aiden looked discouraged. Rosen asked if Aiden remembered the parade in the city center. People with signs were shouting against magical creatures, saying this was their land. A man in the crowd wondered how they could be bad when they helped reclaim the earth, but others pointed at the prison and shouted that the prisoners were just murderers, and that if they stayed, humans would never escape poverty. They saw Rose Prison as a devil's stronghold, and the warden as Satan. Rosen continued, explaining that the conflict between humans and other races was growing, and division was becoming common. There was talk of tearing down the top floor of Rose Prison because the cost of maintaining it was too serious. He said that if Aiden didn't give his opinion on the issue, a happy ending shouldn't be expected. Aiden looked confused and said he didn't agree with eliminating prisoners just for public order. Rosen threw up his hands and said there was no other choice. In his opinion, the only thing Aiden could do was quit. Tension built between them. Rosen looked Aiden in the eye and reminded him that he was the one who put all these prisoners there and caused the situation. Rosen said there were still people at the top who wanted to keep the prison, like the captain's boss, Senator Anthony. If Aiden was willing to eliminate a couple of prisoners to relieve public pressure, Anthony would try his best to keep it open. Rosen suggested that the werewolf Veronica was the best option since she was already sentenced to death, and her passing wouldn't be a burden on Aiden. The captain left, saying Veronica was already on execution row anyway. Other races had united with humans for a short time to fight a common enemy, and for this, they had been rewarded with equal rights. But when the war ended, people were left with poverty and unemployment, and needed someone to blame. Noble people secretly made the other races the culprits. Aiden had to compromise. He couldn't stick to his professional ethics because times were so messy. The only kind thing he could do was choose the date of death for a prisoner who was already sentenced to execution. Aiden walked down the prison corridor with a blonde girl. She said there were no cameras available, and he asked which cell they should choose for the new prisoner. Screams came from the cells, asking when he would be gone. The girl thought about it and said most cells already had several prisoners, but the succubus's cell only had one. Aiden was confused, thinking the succubus had been released 2 days ago. The succubus pressed against the cage and asked Aiden if he wanted to spend the night with her since she had a big bed. Aiden asked her why she hadn't been released. She looked confused. The white-haired girl explained that the succubus hadn't changed her ways and organized other succubi to do her job, which landed the men involved in the hospital. Aiden pointed his finger and yelled at the succubus, saying he was unhappy that she always caused trouble. She said she just made a small mistake, but her sentence was extended for a year. Aiden called her a repeat offender. She rubbed herself against the bars, asking sweetly if he could reduce her sentence and if they could discuss it in her cell that day. The succubus said she was ready to do anything to make him happy. Suspiciously, he asked if she agreed to everything, and she replied, of course, yes to everything. Doctors brought Veronica into the succubus's cell, glad they found a place for her. The succubus was shocked and asked who it was. Aiden said this was her new neighbor, and she was required to inform the guards if anything happened. The succubus succubus screamed after Aiden that she didn't mean for this to happen. Aiden turned to the doctors and asked them to prepare more tranquilizers. They said they would do it right away, but Aiden, looking calm, replied that their workday was over. Since they were not young, they should leave and spend time with their families. The doctors happily thanked him and left. The full moon was visible through the window. Aiden was mixing a potion, thinking the chance of defeating a werewolf with tranquilizers during a full moon was small. The succubus told Veronica that maybe Aiden preferred men. Veronica, standing near the window, told her to shut up and look at the time, believing her situation was wrong. Aiden collected wild belladonna berries, which are poisonous but good for medicine. The succubus turned around and saw an angry Veronica with burning yellow eyes. The werewolf felt she was close to freedom. The succubus screamed in horror at her new neighbor, "Mommy, what are you doing?" The next day, crows circled a statue. The blonde girl read a petition from the half-tiger Philippa in cell number 2, asking to buy a new comb for her fur. Aiden approved the petition with a stamp. The girl continued, saying Catherine from the 6th cell requested a dagger to protect herself from bad spirits. The warden looked annoyed and asked her to tell Catherine to stop thinking the prison guards were stupid. Next, the succubus from the 13th cell filed for an acquittal, blowing a kiss and adding that she would thank him specially. Aiden was confused and sharply refused, asking her to be told that another request like that would lead to serious consequences. People outside the brick building turned around as a doctor ran through the crowd, pushing people aside and apologizing. He burst into Aiden's office in a panic, reporting that something was wrong. The frightened doctor shouted that he had forgotten about the full moon yesterday. He said the dose of sedative he gave the werewolf should have been 10 times bigger. Werewolves are especially bloodthirsty at this time, and the succubus could be in mortal danger. Aiden got up, pushing his chair. His calmness surprised the doctor. Outside the window, Veronica was hugging the succubus. The werewolf looked unhappy, but the succubus called her little sister, asked her name, and insisted the werewolf be more friendly since they were neighbors. A security guard shouted at them to keep a line, as bath time was limited to 10 minutes. The doctor looked out the window in confusion, not understanding how the succubus and the werewolf were getting along so fast. Aiden calmly explained that he watched them all night, and nothing unusual happened. The werewolf behaved quietly, and even made her bed in the morning. The doctor was confused because Veronica's file said she was a bloodthirsty maniac. Aiden suggested that the reason for her obedience might be something else. Veronica stood in front of the statue, gazing at the baby in the figure's arms. The doctor pressed his mask against the window and shouted that there couldn't be a mistake. She wasn't just a werewolf, she was also a bloodsucker. Aiden was puzzled, as he didn't know the term. The girl explained that this was a subspecies of werewolves who had a special relationship with people. She told a story from 100 years ago during the war. Humans and werewolves were under attack by demons and running out of food in the castles. Fear and mistrust were high. To ease the tension, Lord Bray gave his dead child and warhorse to a group of werewolves to eat, showing he wanted to cooperate. This resolved the conflict. Since then, this group, called the Bloodsuckers, stayed with the people and helped rebuild the country. They use extreme methods to control their rampages during the full moon so they can live with humans. The doctor and Aiden listened carefully. The girl finished the story, emphasizing that such werewolves are rare now, because hatred of other races is common in society. The doctor was outraged, asking how they could sentence to death those who invented painful ways to control their animal nature to fit into human society. A guard burst into the office, shouting that something bad had happened. The prisoners were fighting in the shower room, and the werewolf had gone crazy. Aiden calmly took out a revolver and said the doctor was worried for no reason. It seemed his new prisoner was different from other bloodsuckers. At the scene, guards blew whistles and tried to calm the angry prisoners with batons. The creatures screamed that they couldn't see anything, and someone noticed blood on the floor. The guards demanded they return to their cells, but the prisoners were angry, saying they didn't sign up for these conditions. Aiden pointed a gun at the werewolf, who was wrapped in a towel. He asked why she attacked the prisoners and what the reason was. Prisoners on the floor complained that she attacked them unexpectedly. Aiden pointed the gun at her forehead, asking again why she did it. Catherine, one of the victims, hinted that the werewolf, being a bloodsucker, would eventually try to eat them all. The prisoners panicked. Their power was sealed by collars, so they couldn't defend themselves if the werewolf went crazy. The guards tried to calm the crowd, saying the prisoners shouldn't take justice into their own hands. Aiden watched silently. Pointing his revolver, he announced that this prison had strict rules and that everything that happened here must stay within its walls. He was about to file a motion to delay the werewolf's execution and asked if she had any objection. Veronica, with her head down, admitted that people wanted her dead and saw no reason to fight back. The prisoners demanded Aiden end her life. Holding the revolver, Aiden thought about the captain, Rosen, who insisted on eliminating the werewolf. Memories flashed through his head, a pile of empty bottles after one of the prisoners' murders, thoughts of going back to his past life, and a suicide attempt. Shaking the thoughts off, Aiden picked up his revolver, remembering the doctor's words about the unfairness of her situation. As he left, he said there wasn't enough evidence of her guilt, and just wanting a quick death wasn't enough either. He ordered the guards to take Veronica to the interrogation room. Light streamed through the window bars. Veronica lowered her head and said that when she entered the shower room, an argument started, and two prisoners cornered cornered the succubus, looking like they were threatening her. Aiden sat at the table and wrote a statement. Veronica sat opposite him on a chair behind bars. He asked if the werewolf wanted to defend the succubus and beat the others because of it. She replied that she did, because the succubus was defenseless. The warden wrote the testimony down and said he would listen to the succubus when she woke up, but for now, Veronica should return to her cell. Grabbing the bars, she asked him to wait. She shouted that the real reason for their private conversation was different, and she wanted him to listen because the warden was understanding. She claimed she didn't kill anyone, but the evidence said otherwise. Aiden calmly explained that after reviewing her case, he was ready to help her if she had any alibi. He asked where she was on the day of the incident. With hope in her face, she replied that she was arresting a counterfeit alcohol dealer. His wife came to protest this decision, but Veronica ignored her. Later, the wife was found on the floor of her tavern with a bullet in her back. Veronica screamed her innocence through the bars, claiming she didn't even know the time the woman died. The warden looked at her and said her service weapon was missing a cartridge. He asked where it went if she hadn't used it. Standing behind bars, Veronica claimed she wasn't liked in the city and no one would ask her for a weapon. Then the warden asked where she was at the time of the murder. The werewolf claimed she was at a friend's grave, but the cemetery was abandoned, and even the gravedigger couldn't prove she was there. Holding his head, the warden sadly said she had nothing to prove her innocence. Furious, Veronica pulled the bars and yelled that he was lying. Her proof was her own reputation. People thanked her for her good work. The werewolf was smiling and kind to people. She started as a militia member in a small village and was promoted to the mounted police through hard work. Her reputation among residents was perfect. Veronica recalled defeating huge beetles and other monsters with explosive barrels and saving people from a cult. Veronica exclaimed that the warden could question them. Aiden was angry and said that saving others didn't prove she had nothing to do with the merchant's wife's death. He seriously explained that those she saved couldn't help her prove her innocence in this matter. The warden asked her to think again, or she wouldn't be able to convince the judges and advisors. In despair, Veronica hung her head and said sadly that when she was saving so many people, she didn't think that one day she wouldn't be able to save herself. Both the prisoner and the warden were upset. Since she had nothing more to say, he ordered the guards to take the werewolf back to her cell. While Aiden was thinking at the table, the prisoner calmly left with the guard. Another guard entered the room saying the succubus had woken up. Aiden wondered if the succubus was still in the infirmary, but she walked into the room. Turning to a guard named Megan, he asked why she took it upon herself to bring the prisoner here. The succubus tried to say that the warden told her he didn't mind, but the guard closed her mouth, waving her hand and saying she knew the warden well and was sure he could get the necessary information from her. The guard said to call her when they were done, so she could take the succubus away. As soon as the door closed, the guard took out the gold coin she had earned from the rich succubus. The succubus stood to the left of the warden and immediately spoke emotionally about Veronica's innocence. She wanted to explain what happened, pointing her thumb at herself proudly. The succubus claimed to be a famous entrepreneur in the city. Anna and Catherine disliked the succubus. She said they were new here and tried to blackmail her. The succubus thought she was done, but Veronica grabbed the girls by the shoulders with a threatening look. The succubus supported the story by describing Veronica hitting Anna on the nose and then knocking Catherine to the ground so hard she couldn't get up. Trying to understand, Aiden asked why the succubus herself was unconscious. With embarrassment, she replied that she was careless and slipped on a piece of soap. She didn't know what happened next. Aiden sighed and calmly said he understood what happened, but the succubus screamed, "That's not all." She believed Veronica was wrongly convicted. The succubus confidently said that her species could enter people's dreams while they sleep, and yesterday she entered Veronica's dream. In the dream, judges were pointing fingers at the werewolf, who was in complete despair that her life was collapsing and no one would listen. Only the judging fingers were visible against a red wall with light focused on Veronica, who held her head in powerlessness. The succubus believed the prisoner was clearly framed, and if the warden didn't believe it, he could come to the cell at night and see for himself. Aiden said he couldn't be sure the succubus didn't have the power to interfere with the dream, and if she had nothing more to say, she should return. Indignant, she shouted in confusion that the warden was going to condemn an innocent person. The warden's heart started beating faster. Memories flashed back to him. A prisoner in a striped shirt told him he was going to die peacefully, but Aiden would suffer for taking an innocent life. The man felt sorry for him, believing the warden would have no peace. Aiden's eyes narrowed, and he became hysterical. The fears of the past came back. His eyes were red, and an angry scream escaped his mouth. He demanded that Megan immediately take the succubus to the cell. The succubus broke free from the guard's hands, shouting that she had considered Aiden Gaylord the embodiment of justice and the man she loved, but he turned out to be useless, and she was annoyed that she gave so much money just to end up in this prison. Aiden took off his hat and held his head in frustration. A spider had caught a fly in its web above his head, and the warden frantically repeated that this was all messed up. The girl was holding a file in her hands, standing in the office opposite the warden's table. He asked what she thought. Presenting a picture of Veronica being attacked with a revolver, she said the judge thought the prisoner lost control, which was why she shot the victim. But usually, in such situations, werewolves turn into a wolf form and use their claws, rarely using firearms. The employee explained that although Veronica was suspicious, she was still a bloodsucker and could have restrained herself from using a weapon. Aiden was surprised, saying that after reading a couple of lines, it made less sense, and the deeper he went, the stranger it became. The employee wondered what was so special about this werewolf that she deserved so much attention from the warden. Aiden stood up, leaning on his cane, and slowly moved toward the door. Before leaving, he said that passing a death sentence on an innocent person was the most terrible thing he could experience. It was the full moon. A man was holding another man by the throat, and the succubus was moaning with a satisfied look. A cry came from the next cell, asking her to stop making those sounds because they were keeping them up. Lying on her bed, the succubus shouted back that she was young and needed it, unlike the person who was 100 years old and in menopause. Someone poked the succubus with a finger. She turned around, and the warden was standing there. Her eyes widened in surprise and she screamed. She rushed at him, her pupils turning heart-shaped and her tongue sticking out, but Aiden quickly covered her mouth. She didn't have time to say she loved him. He asked her to be quiet and said he wasn't there for that, but to prove the werewolf's innocence. She nodded happily. Aiden hit her legs and asked her to move them. Satisfied, the succubus said now was the perfect time to look into Veronica's thoughts while she slept peacefully. Standing in front of Veronica's bed, Aiden looked at the succubus, holding her hand dismissively. He said she didn't usually help anyone. The succubus replied that he shouldn't think badly of her, since the werewolf helped her, she wasn't heartless. Holding Veronica's hand, the succubus looked kindly at the warden and asked if he was ready. He replied that he was, but told her not to add any silly extras. Stroking Aiden's face, she sent him into Veronica's subconscious. She said she couldn't twist the thoughts. Inside, Aiden saw a huge bloody blade and werewolf bodies. A man with a big knife, who had finished them all, shouted that the rumors were true. Werewolves like Veronica don't fight back. Little Veronica cried and shouted that her relatives needed to fight and shouldn't die like this. The remaining werewolves formed a wall to protect her, claiming they wouldn't harm a person and would keep their promises. Little Veronica ran away screaming for help. Then, wooden hands grabbed her arms. It was a judge, looking like a wooden puppet. Holding the girl, he said he would find those who started the hunt for her kind. The werewolf was crying in fear, bowing before the judge. The judge and his table became huge, and the girl was tiny. Looking down at Veronica in chains with glowing red eyes, he said he would condemn her first. He angrily asked her why she finished with an innocent man. Looking up, she shouted back that she didn't do such a thing. Veronica got even smaller, and there were now 3 huge, angry judges. They yelled that she must have held a grudge over the murder of her clan, and decided to take revenge by killing people. They said there would be serious consequences if Veronica got off lightly. She tried to defend herself, saying she hadn't finished anyone, but the judges hit her with their gavels. They were firm she was sentenced to death. Veronica was surrounded by the gavels, holding her head in hysterics as they struck near her. The judges shouted that wolf instincts couldn't be overcome and yelled about the death penalty. She panicked, screaming hysterically about the unfairness and not understanding why no one believed her. Covering his face, Aiden returned from her mind. Veronica twitched in her sleep. The succubus, standing over her, explained that she brought him back because Veronica's emotions were becoming impulsive and she would soon wake up. Aiden looked confused and said her case was more complex than he thought. The succubus looked at him in surprise. Sure, he could vouch for Veronica, but he sadly replied that she didn't understand how the system worked, and they wouldn't believe him alone. He said she could be freed if the dead could speak. His eyes widened. He remembered he could talk to the dead. The necromancer, Asina, in his prison had the magic to talk to spirits, and this could help him. Aiden and the succubus quickly turned toward a sound behind the cell bars. A voice greeted Anthony. Aiden wondered what Senator Anthony was doing there so late. Aiden held the door handle and saw Anthony sitting at a table by the window. Approaching Anthony, Aiden said he shouldn't be there, as his appearance in the middle of the night could cause unnecessary talk. Anthony told him to look out for himself and not involve others in his business. Aiden didn't understand what Anthony meant. The man rolled his eyes and scornfully told him that the prison would only be saved if he finished the prisoner. He was surprised no one had told the warden earlier. Rumors that reached Anthony said Aiden was investigating the case of a prisoner sentenced to death. He asked if this was true. Approaching the window and looking back at Anthony, Aiden was amazed at how good Anthony's informant was. He wondered how Anthony knew he was working on this case. Anthony replied that the newspaper office belonged to him, so it was easy for him to find things out. He threw a newspaper on the table and asked the Lord to read it. The headline said, "A cruel, bloodthirsty werewolf has been detained. Lord Aiden brings justice to Silver City." Anthony pointed to the newspaper and said he had been working on this lately. He hoped the Lord knew what he was doing. Anthony slammed his hand on the table, claiming the hero of the past cut the devil with his own hands, and justice won. He said the Lord would become a hero to everyone everyone, and the council would be forced to keep the prison. Anthony looked at the Lord intensely and asked why he was investigating and what he wanted. Did he want to challenge the court's decision? Aiden's eyes were confused. He stated that the judge made a rushed verdict, and the case had many problems. Anthony began to yell, calling out Aiden's name and assuring him there was no mistake. He said Aiden's actions might make the judge and council members dislike him, which would make keeping the prison impossible. With a displeased face, Anthony said he wouldn't stop the Lord's justice, but now wasn't the time. The goal was to put the Lord back on the pedestal. Looking straight into the Lord's eyes with hope, he asked him to think about what was more important, being a hero to the people or a fair judicial decision. Aiden hung his head while Anthony told him there would be time for justice later, as there were many unjust sentences in the city, but now he just needed patience. A thunderstorm hit near the prison. Aiden sat with his back to the window, hands folded on the table, deep in thought. He pushed his chair back slowly, leaned on his cane and walked forward. He inserted a key into a locker and turned it, opening a door hidden among the bookshelves of his personal library. Inside the locker, Aiden punched in the code 4 zeros, and the bookcase slid open like a door. Taking the lantern, he held it out and went down a very long staircase. A woman's voice was barely audible from the depths, asking if he was hatching a dangerous plan now. He was confused and asked how she knew. He placed the lamp on a shelf. The woman's voice explained that people usually look for support from loved ones when making tough decisions. He approached her. She continued to say that she was the only one who knew him best. Aiden was very small compared to the woman in this basement. She was half bird, with huge white wings, and her arms and legs were chained and nailed down. A halo and flowers were in her white hair. The girl pulled the chains to get closer to Aiden, asking the obvious question about him coming to her again. He said he was going to investigate a prisoner's case, but before he could finish, she asked how, explaining that he didn't know the consequences this might have. Looking up at her, he asked sarcastically if she always knew everything. Aiden approached a huge playing field with game pieces the size of himself. Standing opposite him, she offered him a game. If he won, Aiden would get the answer he wanted. He agreed to play with the goddess of conspiracy, Melophilia. The overseer pushed the checker across the field with his whole body. One of the checkers flew to the end, and the symbol on it lit up red. Melophilia said he wasn't focused on the game. He had nothing to say in response. Continuing to move the checkers, he said the goddess's question wasn't silly. Perhaps she suggested that someone from the top was behind the werewolf's case. He pointed the saber and said the police accepted a fake case, and the judge rushed the verdict. Now was his turn to deal with the case. Aiden claimed they were trying to close the prison and demanded they deal with the werewolf quickly in return. The goddess started laughing loudly. She said the warden never thought about why the prison was built with all the magic signs and silver buildings. She calmly said they were built to hold her, and as long as she was chained there, the prison would stay. The talk about closing it was just a trick by the council to gather votes. Therefore, Warden Aiden had to take good care of her. He looked discouraged by her words. She added that if she escaped, the prison would indeed close. Aiden stood, leaning on his cane, and said he had finished an innocent person in the past, and that pain would not happen again. Looking down at Aiden, she arrogantly said he was weak and wouldn't achieve what he wanted without magic companions. She asked how he was going to fight. He told her he was going to use the power of 3 prisoners who had contacted him before. He planned to hide his identity by using the trio's help. With kindness in her eyes, she warned him that pretending and forcing prisoners were slightly different things, and it would cause resentment. She asked if he could handle it in his current state. After thinking, he remembered that he approved prisoner applications every day, so he knew what the creatures wanted. He could use their desires to turn the situation in his favor and suppress any unhappiness. The goddess smiled and asked sarcastically if he would have enough time for this, and if he could do the job with the help of the trio. Holding his hand to his chin, the Lord thought. He decided he could use the power of the other prisoners once he understood them. Aiden realized he could use their files for this. He wanted to tell a friend to bring all the files to his table so he could pick out the information he needed. In his thoughts, he imagined giving a gift to a prisoner, and she would help him with her strength by giving the creatures what they wanted. Lord Aiden planned to use their powers to achieve his goal. He imagined himself standing against cages with thousands of prisoners, sitting on a throne, surrounded by all the prisoners, who would be 1,000 solutions to his problem. The checker went to the edge of the field and lit up. A check had been made. The goddess bowed before Aiden again, and asked, somewhat jokingly, if he knew what it would take to lose to her. The warden became tense, and sweat appeared on his face. Melophilia laughed sarcastically and said she was just messing with him. No person could beat her in mind games. This time she would let him go, but next time they would play airplane chess. He silently nodded in agreement. Turning away from the goddess, he walked back to the prison walls. The goddess said after him that she had used a lot of effort to return his sinful soul, so he better not disappoint her. At sunset, the Lord's hand opened the cell door. A woman's voice said he was energetic, and she knew he visited the succubus's room at night. Asena asked in surprise what he wanted from her. Was he really interested in necromancer, like she was? Her file read, Prisoner File Number 77. Name, Asena. Race, Undead. Case, Necromancer. Abilities, Summon Undead. Black Magic. Danger Level, S-Class. She received a life sentence for desecrating graves, illegal experiments, spreading the plague, and organizing terrorist attacks with the living dead. Looking at a book, Asena said she understood why the warden came to her. He wanted her to summon the soul of the dead, but she was angry because she already helped him the other day and wasn't his servant. Plus, she was busy reading. She handed him a pendant and told him to do everything himself. Looking at the creature-shaped pendant, Asena said it was created to summon a revenant and needed to be used near a corpse. Aiden was shocked, not understanding how someone could wear such a dangerous thing. She refused to wear prison clothes, reminding him that the contract allowed personal items, and the pendant was part of her outfit and wouldn't help her escape. Asena showed Aiden how to activate the pendant. It almost fell, but Aiden caught it mid-flight. The shadow of a huge purple skull appeared in front of the warden. Asena apologized to him, explaining she didn't mean to drop the pendant. She just wanted to show how to summon the dead. She warned the warden not to touch the skeleton because it was under a spell. Asena assumed their agreement was over. Thinking Aiden was shaking with anger and saw her as a troublemaker, she knew she shouldn't anger a man like him. Memories of Asena standing at the bottom of a mountain, looking up at a warrior who defeated a horde of creatures, flashed by. It was she who lost the battle to him. Asena turned toward the exit and tried to explain that she didn't want this and asked him not to come to her. He turned around at her words and smiled, saying he heard she had read all the books in the library and was complaining about new ones. Aiden said he would bring her a couple of new bestsellers. Asena remained in the cell, completely confused. She was shocked that he was so nice and understood what he meant. A raven sat on a branch. Aiden was at the cemetery, digging a grave. He was at a loss. Opening the coffin lid, he saw an urn with ashes. The coffin held roses, a bottle of alcohol, and a photograph of the dead woman. He didn't know if he could summon a dead person if their body was cremated. The warden tried to use the pendant, but nothing happened. He twirled it over the gravestone, trying to make it work. The cemetery caretaker came out of the building and cursed at the noise, wondering what he was doing so late. Rubbing his eyes, he swore they were keeping him from sleeping. A look of horror appeared on the caretaker's face. He screamed in fear, shouting that there was a ghost, and ran away from the cemetery. Aiden turned his head, surrounded by spirits that had risen from their graves. He bowed and apologized for disturbing the dead. The warden thought he had underestimated the pendant's power, but it didn't work with ashes. He needed to find another way. Behind him, the murdered merchant's wife emerged from her grave, asking who dared to disturb her peace. Aiden realized he succeeded in summoning her. He shouted that the killer was still free and asked her to name him so he could take revenge. She said she had little time and, without naming the killer, vanished in a flash that blinded Aiden. He saw the scene. A man threatened the merchant's wife, saying he would expose her husband's business if she wasn't honest. She demanded he let her go and said she had already paid him. The man's face wasn't visible, only his collar with a horse badge. He said she wasn't as innocent as she claimed, and then fired a shot. The spirit asked for revenge and disappeared. Aiden fell to the ground, trying to dig. He was angry that the spirit left without giving him the killer's name. Looking at the ground, Aiden thought he needed to find clues. The man's uniform was typical of the mounted militia. After the murder, the killer likely set up evidence to frame the werewolf. He took a cartridge from Veronica's revolver, which meant this man must have access to all weapons. Only the keeper of Arsenal would have that access. At the mounted police building, a mustached man in uniform asked Aiden who he was looking for. After hearing the keeper of the arsenal, he invited Aiden into his office. He said it was an incredible chance to see the Lord in person. A short, frail man with a mustache and suspenders appeared at the door. The keeper held his head and asked confusedly how he could help Aiden. Aiden kindly replied that his revolver was broken, and since he was passing by, he decided to have a master repair it. The keeper smiled and said he understood but needed to know what happened to it. Still smiling, he said the problem was with the cylinder. It often spun unnecessarily, and a weapon rotting without a bullet was a sad sight. The man's expression suddenly changed to fear. He shook his head and explained that he was too busy to do anything now. Lord Aiden thanked the man and left. He thought that, based on the victim's memories, the keeper was not the same size as the killer. His reaction was strange, but the Lord decided not to pressure him so he wouldn't scare off a bigger fish. At sunset, in the stable, a police officer struggling with a horse asked the keeper, Bruce, what was wrong and why he was so sad. He asked where Bruce got so much money. Bruce told him to leave because he wasn't in the mood. He remembered Aiden's face and how he talked about the missing bullet. He thought it was just a coincidence. He turned toward a sound. The grave caretaker was hysterically talking about the innkeeper's grave and that a man worshipped by all the spirits had been at her newly created grave. Bruce decided to listen further. The caretaker said the spirit screamed for revenge. Bruce imagined a scary movie and, after hearing revenge, he rushed home. The men who remained listened to the caretaker, trying to convince them that it was really the innkeeper's voice. Bruce forcefully pushed open his door, wrapped his head in a blanket, and lay on the sofa. Crows watched him from the window, broadcasting what was happening to the orb Aiden held. Aiden said it was suspicious. If Bruce wasn't involved, why was he hiding and not leaving the house? He held the ball and told the witch, Daly, that he would use it to have the crows monitor what was happening. She said she heard him giving instructions, sitting on a chair and crossing her legs. The witch wondered what brought the warden to her. Daly's file read, Prisoner case number 78, name, Daly, race, human, case, one of the 7 great witches, abilities, summoning the apostle, divination, danger level, S-class. She was sentenced to a long term for being involved in an extremist group, illegal research, attacks, and robbing a bank. Standing next to the bars, the witch asked what the Lord planned to do with her. He didn't understand what she was seeking, and arrogantly said they weren't equal, so she couldn't make a deal with the warden. The witch became thoughtful, realizing she got carried away, and forgot she was there because of him. She remembered giving him a fight, but when he almost destroyed her animals, she gave up. Raising her hands, the witch shouted that she surrendered, and that he had defeated her. Then, waving her hand, the witch laughed and said it was a joke and she understood there could be no deal. Before leaving the cage, he turned to her and said he was glad she was aware. He added that he would help her based on the situation, but she shouldn't take it for granted. The witch breathed a sigh of relief and sat on the bed. Aiden decided to continue the conversation, which scared the witch again. He said he wanted to help the prisoners get used to the prison atmosphere and food, so he wanted to buy some desserts to vary their diet. The witch started salivating at the thought of sweets. The warden kept asking if she would like 7th Street cream pie. She laughed with pleasure and said everyone would definitely like him. That night, a fire flickered in the warden's office. Next to the prisoner casebook was an orb showing the keeper's house. Sitting at the table, reading the Silene case, Aiden felt he couldn't just sit there. Nothing was happening in the orb. Deciding he had rested enough, he threw the Silene case on the table, saying it was her turn. At the keeper's house, glasses lay on the table near the bed while he slept, muttering something about how he was really white. Waking up from the noise, he turned his head in horror, not understanding the sound. Looking at the ceiling, he calmed down, thinking someone upstairs broke the glass. Putting on his glasses, he realized he was very scared. Suddenly, he saw there was only a roof above and felt the cold air. Looking up, he saw a clump of hair appear out of nowhere. In horror, he screamed that something shouldn't come closer and hid under the blanket, trying to assure himself it was a dream. But the creature crawled under the blanket, grabbed his face, and said it was mortally offended. In horror, the keeper ran out of the house in his underwear, begging for rescue and running around the city. Aiden held the orb, watching what happened, and reflected that when personal safety is at risk, people always turn to a proven method. With a torch, he visited the ghost girl's cage. By threatening to burn her teddy bear, he sought her attention. A girl with black hair, pale skin, and a scar on her neck asked the Lord not to burn the doll since she did what he asked. Her file read, Prisoner case number 996, name, Silene, race, dead man, abilities, penetration into the world of the dead, attack in the square, danger level, D to B. Additionally, the Silene's accumulated powers are in a voodoo doll. The reserves last for 3 months, after which she becomes an ordinary dead person without abilities. But near the end of the 3rd month, the abilities reach their peak. Aiden said he wouldn't touch the doll. He just wanted to make sure she didn't do anything stupid. He sealed her powers back into the bombs. The Silene criticized him for acting unfairly by using the creatures for his own purposes. She warned that he would be mocked. The Lord replied that he was simply trying to achieve justice. He reminded her that when she became this creature to avenge her son, she had to sacrifice a lot. Aiden hoped she would soon let go of this situation and be able to rest. Leaving her cage, the warden took the doll with him. Meanwhile, the keeper, in his underwear, ran past the houses, shouting that the ghost of the tavern owner was chasing him. Someone dragged him into an alley and threw him to the floor. The man facing the keeper, who was lying on the floor, threateningly asked if he wanted more people to know about this. In front of him stood a man with a beard and a horse badge on his shirt collar. The keeper was glad it was Jalong and said he was just about to run to him. Jalong told him to be quiet, and the keeper obediently listened. Jalong asked if the keeper was sure about what he saw. He exclaimed that he was sure and added that the ghost even touched him. The keeper screamed in panic, thinking that this was the work of the man who came to the cemetery that morning, and that some important person had come out to them. Jalong turned to the keeper with a grin, and ordered him to shut up and stop panicking. He was sure this was the work of a necromancer experimenting with spells. Jalong poked the keeper's forehead with his finger, and told him to use his stupid head. After all, they were involved in everything, and if Veronica got out of prison and decided to take revenge, they wouldn't escape. The keeper, with a pitiful expression, said he couldn't survive another meeting with a ghost. Jalong muttered in displeasure that knowing a person like him was like a punishment. In front of a large mansion, Next to the main gate stood the keeper and Zhalong. Columns with engraved signs were on the sides of the gate. Zhalong said the keeper would stay with him since his house was protected by a magic circle created against necromancers. Any unclean creature trying to enter would be instantly destroyed. The keeper looked at the house admiringly and said Zhalong was well prepared for the tavern owner's possible revenge. Removing his hood, Zhalong explained that many people were hunting him, and the necromancer was just one of them. A man with a goatee, blue eyes, and old horse badges on his clothes cast a scornful glance at Bruce and warned him that if he wanted to stay, he had to remember that the road to power was paved with dead bodies. The keeper was confused. Behind him, far from the gate, the shadow of a purple ghost flashed. Meanwhile, Veronica sat behind bars in an interrogation room, trying to figure out who Zhalong was. Aiden sat across the table and asked if she remembered him and how he was connected to her. She recalled preparing her horse on police grounds when Zhalong approached her. He asked her to stop and if she had considered his proposal, looking into her eyes and saying that just a couple of nights with him would give her a promotion. Veronica grabbed his hand and he flinched in pain, not expecting it. She replied with disdain that she wasn't interested in him and apologized for her rudeness. Zhalong was furious, not understanding why she was so shameless. Veronica replied, "That is why she is here." Aiden realized Zhalong was just a regular rich guy destroying what he couldn't get, like many others. He wanted to know more about his past. A bird flew over the city. Looking at a prison cell, Aiden asked how the creature was doing. The shadow of a huge creature fell on him through the bars of the cage. He asked the creature not to be angry and explained that her letters hadn't received a response. Sifting through a stack of letters, he said it couldn't have been otherwise because everyone who read her letters ended up badly. A bird carried a letter over the city houses. Aiden noted that no one in this prison could handle her abilities, so the guards and prisoners were wary of her since they simply didn't know her. Holding the envelopes, he looked at the creature and said he needed help. If she could get one coward out of the house with her power, she would prove she could be trusted, and then the Lord would give her a chance. In the cell sat a creature with yellow eyes, blue skin, and tentacle-like legs. Her file read, "Prisoner case name, 13, race, unknown, abilities, mysterious correspondence, danger level, B class. Additionally, an unidentified species, caught in a northern fishing village." The creature tried to communicate something in a letter, but local fishermen went mad after reading just a few words. It was impossible to classify this creature as a member of any known race. The bird flew into the window at lightning speed, breaking it, leaving a letter and flying away. Bruce screamed in horror, jumped out of bed, and put on his glasses. Looking at the letter at his feet, he wondered what it was. Opening the letter, a look of horror appeared on his face. The letter, with symbols and an octopus with devil wings above it, caused him to panic. He couldn't understand what it was, and the letter spontaneously burned up. Holding his head, which was spinning terribly, Bruce looked out the window broken by the bird. The city in his eyes became dark and sinister. Screams came from the mansion. Zhalong came out of his room and asked what happened. Bruce ran around the first floor, shouting if anyone was in the building. A voice from downstairs said he was there, and Zhalong asked where he was running. Bruce had a look of madness on his face. His eyes were red, and he screamed that the world was ending. Zhalong was confused, not understanding what nonsense Bruce was talking about. The butler standing nearby bowed, and Zhalong turned to him, demanding that Bruce stop and find out what happened. Bruce opened the castle doors and went outside. He imagined a green sky with tentacles and a huge eye, thinking he was alone in the city. A shadow appeared from the door behind him. He thought it was Zhalong, but fell to the ground in fear, thinking he saw the tavern owner's ghost. Bruce cried, looking at the apparition, and asked emotionally if she had come to punish him. The butler, standing over him, didn't understand what was happening and invited Bruce to come inside, as he clearly wasn't feeling well. However, Bruce saw the ghost and shouted to the whole street that he didn't kill her, that it was Zhalong. He claimed Zhalong fired the shot and asked why she was after him. Then, Zhalong took a revolver from his coat. Kneeling in front of the ghost, Bruce begged for mercy, promised to never do this again, and said that the killer should pay, not him. A bullet pierced Bruce's ear. Zhalong held the revolver in front of him. Bruce cried in pain. His mind cleared for a second, and he saw Zhalong shooting at him, but missed because a bird suddenly attacked him. On his knees, a frightened Bruce asked how Zhalong could have shot him. Zhalong brushed off the bird, pointed the gun at Bruce again, and said he warned him not to seek his own downfall. Suddenly, a flock of ravens swooped down on Zhalong, and he missed again as the butler tried to calm him down. Bruce ran away from the mansion screaming, asking to be saved. He fell back into his fantasy, slipping on a piece of fruit and landing in a dug grave. Getting up, he saw a tombstone with Veronica's name on it. Bruce turned around and saw crowds of spears next to the graves surrounding him. He shouted at them not to come closer, claiming he didn't know who they were. He ran away screaming. Merchants who were actually standing next to a cart shouted that he needed to be punished for his actions. Holding his head, Bruce screamed, not knowing where he was. A wasteland with many graves surrounded him, and he eventually ran to a large tombstone with his name on it. He was horrified to see his grave. Shadows of ghosts appeared behind him again. Bruce remembered Jelong's words that if he stayed with him, he had to remember that the road to power was paved with dead bodies. He felt a little better and said that he understood everything. All these shadows were the souls of people Jelong finished, and the same fate awaited him. After these words, the shadows vanished, and he saw the city as it really was, standing next to the silver mine. Bruce was surrounded by people who said he must be crazy to walk down the street in his night clothes, barefoot, talking to himself. Bruce fell to his knees and began to cry. He came to Lord Aiden's office, and kneeling in front of his desk, said that there was a prisoner in the prison who was convicted unfairly. Bruce said he was ready to testify. Bruce admitted that Jelong gave him money to frame Veronica. He also swapped the bullets in their weapons. Bruce apologized for doing wrong and said he was willing to stand as a witness. The warden promised to hide him in prison for a few days for his safety, and in the meantime, Jelong would be dealt with. Franda asked Bruce to leave the office with her. A crow hit the window, catching Aiden's attention. At this time, the butler tried to catch Jelong's horse, but Jelong shouted at him to bring Bruce and forget about the horse. Another servant ran up to him from behind and reported that Aiden already knew about his actions. Pointing forward, Jelong shouted that there was a carriage nearby, and he urgently needed to escape. Aiden watched the situation through a magic ball. Looking at the crow, he praised her and said she could continue to spy. The prison gates opened. Lord Aiden left the prison on horseback, ordering all receptions and meetings to stop until his return. The guard replied that the order would be carried out. Aiden urged his horse on. A hamster with full cheeks suddenly jumped out of his back and ran among the prisoner cells. Asena turned her head, noticing him. The witch called the hamster to her, saying that Daly was very brave and helped the Lord at a critical moment. The hamster took a couple of cartridges out of his cheeks. A voice was heard from another cell, accusing Aiden of being a fool, but the witch replied that she would never believe such a thing was possible. The witch looked at the hamster and told Asena that Aiden was scared of the ghosts in the cemetery and now needed help. After this, it was clear that he was no longer all-powerful. Asena, without looking up from her book, replied that she didn't care about his power, as long as it didn't disturb her comfort. The witch winked and said that she didn't want to spend the rest of her life in prison, and if Aiden was no longer a lord, they shouldn't worry. Her pupils changed, becoming like an iguana's eyes, and she noticed a man in a tree. The witch suggested that Aiden was in for a little surprise. Someone in the tree was watching the Lord on horseback, waiting to see what Aiden could do. Then Veronica screamed from the cage that the Lord was in danger and demanded to be released. The witch turned around, and the guard asked what she said. Veronica claimed that he was being stalked, and the man's scent felt familiar and dangerous to her. The succubus confirmed that Veronica was a werewolf with an excellent sense of smell, and urged them to quickly send someone to help the Lord. Veronica screamed that only she could deal with the threat, and demanded to be released. The confused guards looked at each other, clearly not intending to let her out for such a strange reason. Franda approached the guards and asked them to release Veronica, explaining that her innocence had been almost proven, and she would soon be released anyway. She handed the guards papers, and said she was ready to take responsibility. The prisoners were angry, not understanding why the werewolf had such privileges. The witch threatened to complain about not being let out when requested, and wondered why only this werewolf had such a sensitive sense of smell. The girl with green hair asked what was happening and demanded an explanation. The succubus replied with a wide smile that she was the Lord's official girlfriend and was aware of all his affairs. The prisoners begged her to tell them what was happening. Jelong was attacked by flocks of ravens. He was unable to ride his horse and was slowed down. He shouted at the crows to fly away. Lord Aiden caught up with him, hit him in the face with his cane, and Jelong fell from his horse. Sitting on his horse, Aiden sarcastically asked where Jelong was going, saying it would be better for him to stay at home and wait for the arrest. An arrow pierced a tree, and a man clinging to a rope jumped from the closest tree to Aiden, hitting the horse with a huge rib knife. The dead horse lay next to Jelong and Aiden. A man with a hat and blue hair told Jelong to quickly run away and said he would deal with the Lord himself. Leaning on his hand, he stood up and asked Aiden to get ready for action. Introducing himself as a bounty hunter named White, he described himself as having a scar under his eye. White claimed to be a rising star in his profession because he took on cases of any difficulty. Breaking into a malicious smile, he laughed and said that if he finished the legendary Lord, he would become rich. White rushed at the Lord with a weapon, shouting that his time had come. Aiden dodged, and White missed, stabbing the knife into the ground. White kicked the Lord in the side and shouted that he couldn't leave today. He raised his knife, preparing for the final blow, and already said goodbye to Aiden. At that moment, Veronica rushed along the rooftops with lightning speed. She jumped from a nearby building toward White, striking the protective circle that appeared around the hunter. The cross on his neck cracked, and the protective dome shattered. An angry White quickly left the circle. Aiden, confused, asked Veronica how she managed to escape from prison. She approached him and asked him to pursue Zhelong. The warrior, leaning on a knife, rose from the ground. Aiden stood up and warned Veronica to be careful. An angry White asked her if she understood who she was dealing with. He was surprised that she was trying to stop him. He swung the knife, screaming that she had to die. Veronica dodged the blow. White created clouds of smoke around her and sarcastically reminded her that many years ago he trained on werewolves, and one of them was able to escape. He realized that she was that werewolf. Standing in the smoke, Veronica used her senses to locate the hunter. She quickly found him in the smoke, but hitting the silhouette, she discovered it was just a stick with his cloak. Smirking, White shouted at her from the tree that she was caught and threw a purple potion in a test tube at her. The potion broke on a tree, and the magic turned it into a monster with multiple faces. The monster tried to grab Veronica's leg. White loaded his crossbow and complained that he wasted the secret weapon that was meant for the Lord. He screamed at her again that she must die, and fired arrows from his crossbow. Arrows pierced Veronica's body, and she began to turn into a werewolf. Her body became covered with fur, her eyes began to glow yellow, claws grew on her arms and legs, and her fangs became larger. Zhelong walked through the streets of the city, constantly looking back at Lord Aiden who was chasing him. He pushed passers-by, shouting that even the hunter couldn't stop him. Running without looking forward, Zhelong crashed into a cart loaded with firewood, hitting his nose. He fell to the ground right in front of the Lord. Aiden looked down at him and noticed with surprise that Zhelong didn't even know where to run, and now he was not only an accomplice in the murder, but also the organizer of the assassination attempt on the Lord. Aiden asked if Zhelong would come willingly, or if he would have to use force. People on the street were shocked by what was happening and didn't understand. Blood flowed from Zhelong's nose. He reached for the revolver in his coat, but Aiden quickly pulled out his revolver and pointed it at Zhelong, asking if he had to act that way. When Aiden tried to shoot, he discovered that his revolver was out of bullets. Zhelong laughed sarcastically, noting that the Lord was going to kill him with an empty pistol. Aiden was confused because he was sure there were bullets. Zhelong tried to get his weapon again, but Aiden threw his gun at him and used light magic to blind his opponent. He then pulled a dagger from his cane and knocked the gun out of Zhelong's hand with a blow. Standing opposite, Aiden brought the tip of the dagger to Zhelong's neck. Zhelong began to make excuses, claiming he had nothing to do with the murder. People on the street began to talk as they learned that Master Zhelong had been captured by Lord Aiden, the Lord of Rose Prison. They didn't understand why Aiden was attacking Zhelong, who shouted that Aiden finished the tavern owner and asked passers-by for help. But Aiden was determined to stop Zhelong from escaping. Zhelong wondered how Aiden was going to kill him in broad daylight and asked people to pay attention. With an arrogant look, Aiden warned Zhelong that one more word and he wouldn't get away with just bloodshed. Making a grin, Zhelong shouted that Aiden forced him to do this and took a knife from his sleeve, swinging at the Lord. He angrily said that now it would be clear whose fate would be more difficult. Suddenly, a shot was heard, and Zhelong fell with blood streaming from his head. Aiden didn't understand what happened and turned around, seeing a man behind Zhelong with a revolver who had fired the bullet. The crowd was scared. Zhelong was finished right in front of them. Aiden recognized the man and remembered Veronica saying that Zhelong was the illegitimate son of a member of parliament and everyone was afraid of his father's power. The man addressed the crowd and said that during the investigation into Officer Veronica's case, it was revealed that she was framed by the member of parliament's son, Zhelong, who sent her to prison. Although Zhelong was the son of a powerful man, he couldn't escape unpunished. The man explained that Zhelong committed these crimes due to his incompetence and received the punishment he deserved. He then bowed to the Lord and asked to speak with him privately about what happened. Anthony, Zhelong's father, covered his face with his hands and fell to his knees before the Lord, crying and saying that if he had been stricter with his son, none of this would have happened. The townspeople tried to calm him down, surprised that Anthony turned out to be such a noble man. A loud sound was heard in the distance, and people thought it was an earthquake. Aiden realized that this was Veronica's doing and hurried back. Anthony's eyes were bloodshot. He thought about what else Aiden would seek revenge for. Smoke rose from the forest. The entire field was burned. Lord Aiden looked at the burned tree and thought it had become a battlefield. Suddenly, he felt someone grab his leg. Aiden looked down and saw the hunter crushed by a tree. The hunter begged the Lord for help. Aiden looked at him in confusion, not understanding why he should help someone who wanted to kill him. The hunter angrily replied that the Lord, as a representative of the law, must judge him fairly within the law. Aiden calmly asked if that wasn't what his employers taught him. The hunter recalled that Anthony told him that if he got caught, he should admit his guilt, and Aiden, with his heroic personality, would definitely spare him, and they would create comfortable living conditions in prison. The weight of the tree made the hunter's eyes bloodshot. He reluctantly admitted that he was not taught this and that he was far from the hero Aiden. The Lord remained silent. The hunter, believing he had touched Aiden, Aiden asked him to use magic to lift the tree because he might have injured his spine. Aiden pulled a dagger from his cane. His shadow hung over the lying hunter, holding the dagger halfway in its sheath. He said with a cold voice that he knew no such spells, and that the real noble Lord Aiden was long dead. The hunter screamed in horror that he understood why Aiden was so weak and fought, but couldn't believe he was dead. Aiden glared at him and sarcastically told him to say hi to his employer before swinging his dagger. The hunter died. Pushing through the branches, Aiden called out to Veronica. She hid in the bushes and asked him not to come. She was undressed after the transformation, but Aiden, not realizing this, began to approach slowly, covering his eyes with his hand. He apologized, thinking that something bad had happened to her. Veronica tried to pull her clothes out of the tree branches, asking Aiden not to come near and to give her time to get dressed. She accidentally tore her clothes in the process. Suddenly, voices were heard from the forest. People were asking if anyone was nearby. Aiden gave her his coat and said they needed to leave urgently. They walked along the city street, and Aiden asked Veronica if her transformation was over. She looked at her hand and noticed the fur hadn't disappeared yet. She replied that the transformation would be complete as soon as her pulse returned to normal. Aiden gave her his hat. He said he thought she would turn into a full werewolf. Veronica, holding her neck in embarrassment, admitted that it should be that way, but for some reason, it wasn't happening for her. People in the village had laughed at her because of this feature. She recalled how other children would completely transform and taunt her, saying that until her fur came out completely, she would not go on patrol, but would stay at home. Her grandmother defended her by hitting the offenders on the head with a broom and ordering them to stop bullying the girl. Veronica sadly remembered the village and her pregnant mother calling her for lunch. She said she wished they had never moved to Silver City. Lord Aiden sadly agreed that there were many problems in the city and that it would not be easy to get along with her character here. He remembered how she saved her village and asked why she couldn't just go back there. With a defeated expression, Veronica replied that she couldn't return. When she left, she boasted that she would become one of the people, and now she didn't want to return in disgrace. Suddenly, a voice was heard ahead. Someone asked why there were so many poor people here. The people ahead of Aiden and Veronica were wondering where Rose Prison was. Among them, Veronica noticed a woman with a child and blue hair like her own. She froze in surprise, realizing who she was seeing. Veronica looked ahead at the crowd of poorly dressed people. From afar, she heard the crowd saying that they didn't know what to do because the people here were not at all friendly and had no idea about Veronica. Veronica remembered the village she lived in. Many residents came to see her off to the city. Everyone shouted good luck and asked her to visit often because the village would always be her home. Turning around, Veronica smiled happily at the residents, telling them not to be sad because they would see her again soon. And when she saved up enough money, she would treat them all to a luxurious restaurant in Silver City. Standing next to Aiden, Veronica raised her hand and shouted to the crowd that she was behind them. The surprised faces of the villagers turned, and they ran up to them. Veronica jumped into the crowd's arms. Everyone was happy to see her. Hugging her grandmother, Veronica blushed with happiness. Her grandmother told her that her baby was already quite big. Veronica was confused as to how they all got there. People from the crowd took turns explaining how they arrived. At first, they heard that Veronica had gone to prison, but since there was no post office in the village, they couldn't even write a letter to her, so they had to go in person. They were surprised that they had covered such a long distance in just half a month. Veronica looked down in surprise. The people's feet were all scratched and their shoes were worn out. She was discouraged. A woman in the crowd was surprised that Veronica had been arrested. A man nearby said that her uncle went to the city a few days ago, and the grandmother added that when they heard the news, they immediately rushed to find ways to help her. Aiden, watching this from behind, said that he hadn't thought Veronica had another side to her personality. Out of embarrassment, she covered her face with her hand and asked the warden not to laugh at her. People started yelling at Aiden for keeping her in prison. He said calmly that it was just a misunderstanding, that everything was fine, and she would soon be acquitted. People didn't understand how Veronica could do anything bad. A man of noble blood with a mustache shouted at the village people, referring to them as poverty. The man looked annoyed and said that the villagers didn't know the rules of big cities at all. The girl nearby also made a disgusted face and claimed that they shouldn't go beyond the slums. The baby in the girl's arms turned red. He realized that the townspeople were trying to insult them. The woman said that since Veronica was fine, they would go back to the village. The guy behind him hoped that Veronica would treat them to food. For this, they grabbed him by the ear and demanded he shut up because Veronica was now a city girl, and she would be embarrassed to be with a bunch of hillbillies. The guy screamed in pain. The grandmother turned to Veronica and told her to take care of herself. They were going to leave. Veronica looked at them, wanting to say something, but hesitated. Lord Aiden interrupted her thoughts and invited the people to stay for a couple of days since they had traveled traveled a long way. Aiden turned to Veronica and asked if there was a prize in her coat. She was surprised. He put his hand in her pocket and took out gold coins. She was shocked that she had as many as 30 gold pounds in her pocket, the face value of which was equal to the amount of gold in them. She showed people a handful of coins in her hand. They were all surprised. Many had not even seen so much gold. Veronica was surprised. She wanted to express her gratitude to the Lord, but without waiting for an answer, he suggested that she take them to a restaurant in the city center and treat people to dinner. The guards ran toward the crowd, shouting the Lord's name. His deputy, out of breath, said, "Thank God nothing happened to him." He replied that he was going to dinner with Veronica's friends. The deputy was surprised that he was going to have dinner with them. The Lord made a subtle jab at the people who were trying to offend the villagers. He said that there will always be slackers who strive to blurt out nasty things towards other people. Looking at the Lord, said that she understood him. Taking the gun in her hands, she began to reload it with an angry look. The man in the hat and the woman who was with him ran away. The Lord asked Veronica to accept these coins as compensation for what happened to her. She looked at the Lord kindly and then lowered her face. The guards decided to escort Veronica's friends. They were surprised that she had so many friends. Before leaving with them, Veronica turned around. She looked at the Lord, who stood leaning on his cane, watching the city from above. Veronica took his outerwear by the collar and buried her nose in it. Later, a die fell on the table. There were 4 tables in the room where people were sitting. The voiceover said that Veronica's case was more successful than expected. A council member sat at one of the tables with a book. Anthony did not hire a lawyer and remained silent throughout the entire process. During the interrogation, it became clear what happened. He walked in the rain, completely dejected, and the result of this situation was obvious. The man shouted that he shouldn't even think about reconsidering the case. He took him at his word, and then it was better for him to go to prison. The voice continued to say that his father didn't help him either. The councilman held a gun pointed at his son. He willingly shot his own son, who would soon be imprisoned in the back. Aiden and his assistant looked at Anthony, who was getting wet. The difference from his usual behavior was huge. Standing in front of people, he spread his arms with a newspaper in his hands. Perhaps he was afraid that the incident would become public knowledge, and then he would lose his status as a member of the government. Or perhaps something worse would come up during the interrogation. This will never be known for sure. Veronica bowed to Aiden and his assistant. After the incident, she returned home with her fellow villagers. She left the city with a crowd of friends. It was better for her to stay away from the city, and this case was finally closed. Aiden moved a piece across the playing field. A woman's voice asked if the prisoners who helped him received what they deserved. Sitting at the table in front of the goddess, Aiden replied that he had received the lists, and everything would be delivered to them a little later. He didn't think that she, as a goddess, would care about the fate of the other prisoners. She made a malicious smile. She explained that it wasn't about caring for creatures but about himself. She understood perfectly well what people were thinking. On one side was a bald man with a tear flowing, and on the other, a man who had put on a serious expression. The goddess continued to explain that admitting defeat and enduring things of varying magnitude was not the end. Smiling gently, she added that the effective use of prisoners was the only thing that would help him in self-defense. The die flew over the playing field. She said, "The brighter the light, the darker the shadow." This game was getting more interesting for Aiden. Soup was poured. The cook called the next prisoner in line. The Medusa, at the end of the line, asked why daily the dog came for breakfast. The witch heard their words and got annoyed. They didn't understand why she came if she usually slept until the last minute. The cook called the next person. The witch smiled and asked if there was any other food. She said that lately her stomach had been bothering her, and she couldn't eat salty foods. People in line protested, saying that she was in prison, and she should leave the line if she didn't want to eat what they gave. They asked the guards to take her away. The cook, with a cigarette in her mouth, said there was something different today. She handed her a huge cream cake, and said that the warden ordered it to improve the quality of life of prisoners who were new to prison and couldn't adjust. She said, "Let the witch eat it, since she is not feeling well." The creatures in the queue were shocked. The prisoners shouted to the cook that they also wanted cake. One of the girls said that everything was fine with the witch yesterday. The cook said that they had all been in this prison for 20 years. The witch left with the cake in her hand, thinking that they were all losers. Asena came to the library. She asked if there were any new books. A girl with pink hair walked into the library. She answered the necromancer, faster than the librarian, that she had already searched everything here. Shrugging her shoulders, she said that all the books here were just old. The guard climbed onto her shelf. She said that a new book arrived today that she hadn't had time to put on the shelf yet. The pink-haired girl said that this was the book she wanted. The necromancer grabbed the book and ran forward. The girl screamed for Asena to give her the book and said that she was ready to wash her socks for her. The necromancer turned around. She wondered what kind of book this was if the girl was ready to make such sacrifices for it. Looking inside, she realized that it was a book that had been secretly distributed among the prisoners, but she had never gotten her hands on it. A book called The Desire of a Beast of Prey, which talked about different types of exotic animals. After reading a little, Asena was shocked. She imagined the pumped-up anthropomorphic anthropomorphic animals described there. Then the tentacled creature in its cage held onto the bars. A short girl approached her cell. She had green hair and eyes and was wearing a striped t-shirt and short green shorts. She greeted the creature and introduced herself as Jalala, the translator sent by the warden. The creature said something in its own language. Jalala said that she understood her because forest elves are good at reading other people's emotions. Language is a carrier of emotions, so it is not difficult for me to understand the creature. The creature suddenly released its tentacles and grabbed the elf. She began to hug the elf, which shocked her. She said she understood her concern, but she would like to be released because the creature was sticky. Later, the shower was foaming. The succubus stood under the water. The shadows of two girls fell on her in the back. They said she was risky enough to shower alone. The pirate and the horse thief looked at the succubus. There was a bag of money on the shelf nearby. They thought she had money for them. They said that it would be better for her to give them this money and not take them out to fight. They were scared by a voice from behind. Two silhouettes were behind them, who said that this money was not for them. Turning around, they saw the tigress, who was flexing her fists, and the dragon, Carmilla, who asked how much money they needed. The succubus laughed maliciously. She remembered how, after helping the Lord, she caught his hand and said that since she helped get into Veronica's subconscious, Aiden should help her in return, unless, of course, he used her. Aiden asked if she didn't say she was helping him out of a sense of duty. She smiled and said that she did not promise him help. In her opinion, the Lord hardly had time to deal with her offenders, who remained unpunished. She asked the Lord to leave them to her. Standing near the exit from the cage, he paused, and then asked her not to overdo it. Turning to the offenders, the succubus made a malicious face. She asked her mercenaries to beat the pirate and the horse thief to death if they could do it. They turned pale with fear and simultaneously began to apologize to the succubus. Laughter could be heard from the prison windows. The girls kept apologizing. The succubus sarcastically asked if they thought she was that weak. She said that today there would be a lesson for them. After these words, she began to laugh ominously. Meanwhile, Anthony was sitting at his desk in his office. The butler approached him and asked if he really wanted to do this. He wanted to object, but Anthony, looking at the photo of his son on a horse, said that he should go to the Queen of the Ants and tell her that her precious daughter was in Rose Prison. The butler asked in fear if this was the queen who liked to experiment on people. Anthony turned to the butler and said with a sinister look, "That's right, he's going to make Aiden pay for everything." Later, green butterflies flew through the forest. Jalala stood in front of a statue. She talked about herself. Jalala, forest elf, a slender elf in green clothes and white hair, holding a beautiful bow in her hands. She jumped and aimed forward. Jalala spoke of wisdom, tallness, elegance, and quick mortality, and all this had nothing to do with her. Little Jalala, looking more like a child, walked forward along the prison corridor. She said it's obvious because she had a pretty appearance. She remembered how she accidentally fell asleep while there was a huge fire around her house. She said her business selling illegal substances unfortunately suffered losses. They brought Jalala, holding him by the ponytail at the back of his head. Aiden was surprised. She ended up in Rose Prison for her business, but she was having a good time here. Deputy Aiden asked if she was busy. She said yes. The deputy asked her to be careful not to fall. The prison guards carefully monitored all prisoners except herself. Everyone loves her, something that every prisoner cannot boast of. The elf was confused. The prisoners shouted after her that she was a cute carrot. Some people didn't understand how her ability to read emotions related to the fact that she was a translator. Her so-called popularity had similar disadvantages. The prisoners didn't understand Jalala, the forest elf, or how forest elves worked in general. Jalala approached the water creature's chamber, addressing him as 13, and asked about his wishes today. The creature made a noise in its own language. Jalala realized that 13 couldn't go to the toilet. She understood that such creatures posed a great danger because they spoke an incomprehensible language. 13 held its hand on its stomach, embarrassed. Jalala plunged into a fantasy where she imagined a big explosion happening on the planet, with constipation, riots, massacres, and all of this causing the destruction of the world. Wings appeared on her back, and she folded her hands on her chest. Aiden approached her, asking if she was finished. The elf was frightened by Aiden's unannounced appearance. She was shocked and asked what was wrong. He calmly said that he wanted to send her to another prisoner, although he wasn't sure it was worth it. Jalala said that this was nothing for her, and Lord Aiden needn't worry, as she was confident in her professional skills. She widened her eyes as the shadow from the bars fell on her. The supervisor asked how this job was for her. The elf was taken aback. From a wood elf's point of view, many things in the world have emotions, even mountains, rivers, and skeletons that have lived a hard life, but Evange, who was sitting quietly, had none. Not a single one. The elf strained to read at least some emotions, but in the end she wondered whether this girl was even alive. She looked up at Aiden and explained to him that Evange was like a piece of flesh that only eats and digests food. She has no emotions, no thoughts. If you tried to describe her, you should say that this is a girl as an object, and not as something animate. Aiden said sadly that it looked like it would take him longer. While Aiden was opening the cage with the key, the elf noticed that his finger was wrapped. She asked what happened to his hand. Having opened the door, he turned to the girl and said that it was an accidental scratch, nothing to worry about. Aiden sat down on the chair opposite the girl, opening a book. He said that today's lesson would begin now. They would talk about the fairy tale Cinderella. The elf didn't understand why he was studying with her. If he really wanted to make her an ordinary child, she thought it would be easier to teach a bear to ride a bicycle than this. Meanwhile, a hooded man offered a merchant a potion, holding test tubes in his hands. These were freshly prepared potions that would help for whitening, anti-wrinkle, hair growth, and aphrodisiacs. The merchant was at a loss. The butler appeared in front of him. He asked what the man was looking for. The butler led him into the room standing behind the merchant. The butler said he knew how to help her get her daughter back from prison. Turning to him, she asked if they wanted to help her escape. Turning back, the butler said that no, they couldn't do that, but they could arrange for her to be imprisoned in Rose Prison, and then she could get her daughter out on her own. The merchant angrily grabbed the test tubes and angrily asked if he wanted to put her in prison. Another man came into the room and said that she needed to understand him correctly. Anthony explained that of course they had a plan to keep her from getting hurt. Turning to Anthony, the merchant replied that she remembered him. Lord Aiden sued him. The man said that he shouldn't introduce himself then, and Aiden was their common enemy. He gave her a confidential document that described the layout of Rose Prison and the patrol route. While the merchant was getting acquainted with the document, Anthony outlined a plan in which, before going to prison, she needed to familiarize herself with this document. He said that they would try to weaken the effect of the magic circle before she reached it. Prison guards would be weakened and their numbers reduced. Hands reached out from behind bars. He continued to say that his agents who were in prison would help pull everything off. She, in the guise of a queen ant, would simply act as an intermediary. He asked if she was interested in the further course of action. The merchant put the sheets of paper on the table and, laughing, told them to go ahead. She was sure that a simple official like her could not implement this on her own. There was definitely someone of higher status behind him. Anthony said not to worry about it. He wanted Aiden to just die, so he offered her a job together. The merchant opened a bottle of potion, while Anthony and his butler watched. She downed the bottle in one gulp. She began to shake and sank to her knee. She rose above the ground and transformed with magic. She lifted the hem of her dress and turned into a beautiful young girl with black hair, purple eyes, and a long dress with heels. She said that the prison base should use her under the name Mary and make it a crime selling contraband. The men clapped for her transformation. Later, Evans was sitting in her cell, reading a book. It said that she should wait a little, and soon her mother would come to save her. The deputy warden thanked the cook outside for the sandwich. She picked up the triangular sandwich and took a bite. On the street, shadows fell at her feet. Men ran past the girl. She blew on the sandwich and thought something was wrong. As she was leaving, a group of men began to follow her. Someone with red glowing eyes was watching her from the corner. She thought it was brave to do something like this in the middle of the day. Someone ran toward the girl. She mechanically took out her revolver. The man knelt down. The girl pointed the revolver at him. He stood in front of her with flowers on his knees, a plump man with a mustache, smiling. He held flowers in front of him and asked her to marry him. She choked on her sandwich and said she was already married. The man was shocked. He ran away from her, throwing flowers. The girl was perplexed, and the men behind said that this was a great pity as he ran away. The man screamed that his heart was broken, and he could never love anyone again. Later, there was a newspaper on the table, with the headline Aiden's Retribution, and the sub-headline Flowers and Roses. Standing before Lord Aiden, the deputy said that this photo was taken when the Lord arrested the commission's son. One of the journalists witnessed this. She explained that he wrote an article about the Grove and sent it to the newspaper. Now it was the most discussed topic. The girl blushed. She said that in addition to confirming his professional qualities as a prison guard, the article also spoke about the physical fitness of the prison guards. It described how the article looked visually. The guards were described as the ideal embodiment of the Valkyries, every man's dream. The girl turned completely red from embarrassment after reading the article. Aiden came to the conclusion that it attracted men to read, and this was not a bad thing at all. Looking through the papers on the table, Aiden explained that he meant that most employees were lonely due to the nature of their work, and it was not easy for them to find a spouse. They could use this article and find a partner they liked. There was a knock on the door. A security guard came into the office with a large envelope. Aiden was holding a book with a daisy on the cover. He read what it said about the Imperial Women's Prison Kula. Sitting at the table in front of the guard, the Lord said that this was an employment contract, and he understood that the security guard wanted to transfer there. She said he got it right. Aiden opened his desk locker and said that he understood that there were more prospects there compared to the Silver City. Then he decided to begin the dismissal procedure. The guard thanked him. The doctor ran into the door without knocking. He showed the letter in his hands and said that he received a letter from the medical institute. Lord Aiden was confused. He didn't understand why everyone decided to resign. Then night fell over the city. A hooded man stood next to the wall in the cells. The girls didn't understand why there was so little security. They screamed that they were underestimated. The remaining two guards demanded that they shut up. Aiden and his deputy were in disbelief in the office. A whole crowd of guards and doctors lined up around the warden's desk. He asked if they had all been contacted. One security guard said said that a businessman wanted her to become his personal security. The second said she was hired as an honor guard. The line of people stretched far beyond Aiden's office door. People shouted different things. Some were wondering how much longer they had to wait, some were asking to be quick, and others were saying that this was their last day here and they were incredibly excited. The guards whispered to each other. Some said that they were taken to a fashionable restaurant. For some, the employer clearly looked at them. The deputy thought this was not good, and how could this happen? She looked at the crowd with confusion. With so many resignations, unrest in the prison would be inevitable. She shouted to her colleagues to attract the attention of the guards and doctors. She emotionally argued that the sudden resignation of so many people could affect the normal functioning of the prison, and asked them to work for another month so that they could find someone new to take their place. The security guards talked to each other. Everyone said that they couldn't wait a month. Their employers asked for an answer as soon as possible. The indignant guards shouted that they were tired of living in this isolation. Being with prisoners affected their psyche. Others shouted that the food in this prison was disgusting, and compared to what their employers served them, it was dog food. They were completely angry with the girl, shouting that she wanted to leave them here when they were all one step away from a new, better life. They screamed that Aiden might not sign their resignation letters, and the most that would happen was non-payment of wages for this month. The girl confusedly asked them to calm down, not to get excited. Lord Aiden hit the table. He demanded that everyone shut up. Lowering his head, he said that they were in a hurry like little children. Looking at them arrogantly, Aiden asked them to think about the honor of the uniform they wore. Each of them was responsible for millions of lives, and before leaving, they should complete all their current tasks. He believed that this was not much. The guards took off their helmets and threw them on the floor. Aiden was silent. He remembered the last time he saw Anthony on the street in the rain, and understood that revenge was the dismissal of the entire staff and an article in the newspaper. Then they left, and Anthony smiled after them. Suits and weapons were on the floor. The doors to the warden's office were open, and starting from the corridor, ammunition and weapons of the guards were lying on the floor. The tigress held onto the bars and screamed to be let out. It was time to open the doors and let everyone in for breakfast. The prisoners asked where the other guards were and what they were hiding from them. The guards beat the cages with sticks and demanded that the prisoners shut up. They were not allowed to leave until Lord Aiden gave the order. The Lord looked at the open gate. Aiden and his deputy stood in front of a statue of a man holding a baby. Aiden said there was no point in waiting any longer. If the guards who left them yesterday had not yet returned, it meant that they would not come. The girl said that she didn't know what to do. They had a serious shortage of manpower. Everyone was on edge, and if the prisoners found out, then a disaster would begin. A girl behind the gate overheard their conversation. Aiden realized they were being listened to. The girl came out from the corner. Her face turned red, and she said that since they were looking for employees, she would like to apply. The deputy was surprised to see Veronica. She asked why the werewolf was not in the village. Veronica blushed with shame and, turning to the wall, began to run her finger along it. The villagers told her to come back because she said she could learn a lot from Lord Aiden. Standing next to the gate, she was surprised that the prison was so empty today. She asked if she came on time. A guard ran out of the prison building. The Lord and the girl turned around. She shouted that the prisoners were about to start a riot. With so few guards, they wouldn't be able to stop them. Snakes crawled out of the bars. Medusa yelled that now was the perfect moment to make a break for it, since the guards seemed to be down to less than 100 people. The tigress looked really happy about this. Another creature quickly chimed in, saying loudly that there was only one guard for every 10 prisoners. He then super boldly demanded they open the cells right away, suggesting that maybe then the guards could survive. Suddenly, red light came from the creature's eyes everywhere, and laughter echoed from all directions, totally freaking out the guards. The elf was absolutely terrified. She sensed a scary future brewing, upcoming power grabs, major disagreements, terrible acts, and a general mood of uprising. She hid right under the bed, covering her ears. She felt so awful that things were going to turn out so unfairly for Lord Aiden. What was about to happen seemed totally wrong. Just then, Lord Aiden's shadow appeared at the prison door. A panicked guard rushed up to him, saying the prisoners were completely out of control. The succubus called out to Aiden from her cell, asking him to keep her safe because she was scared. Her eyes went wide when she saw a werewolf silhouette standing next to Aiden. She ran to the bars and screamed at the werewolf to hurry home because a mess was happening inside. Meanwhile, Veronica was pulling on a security guard uniform, zipping it up and fastening the belt. The warden asked who was stirring up all the trouble. The succubus was stunned and couldn't figure out why Veronica was suddenly a guard. The tigress just smiled slyly and asked sarcastically who had come to see her. She noticed Veronica and wondered if things were so bad that they had to bring in any werewolf for security. Veronica didn't say a word. The deputy turned to Veronica, explaining that as the newest guard, she needed to set a strong presence right now, or dealing with the prisoners later would be a headache. Veronica turned her head toward the prisoners, thought for a second, raised her finger, and demanded to see the troublemaking trio. Laughter exploded from the cells. The prisoners said the last guard used a weapon to threaten them, and she was using just a finger. One prisoner smirked and called Veronica brash, declaring she would handle everyone herself. That prisoner's face immediately met the sole of Veronica's boot. She slammed the second one to the ground with a powerful hit to the face. The third one, Medusa, grabbed by the snakes on her head and knocked her against the floor. The trio lay still at her feet. Veronica faced the remaining prisoners and asked if anyone else wanted to try her punch. Everyone went completely silent, eyes wide with shock. The guard next to Aiden was stunned at how easily Veronica handled them and how much power such a delicate-looking girl had. Aiden explained that Veronica was a star student at the police academy. Apparently, people at the academy weren't the biggest fans of creatures, so Veronica constantly had to prove her strength to keep her grades up. The security guard's file had her details. Name, Veronica. Race, werewolf. Age, 21. Her application said she had little experience, but wanted to learn from Lord Aiden. Her experience included handling huge, scary-level monsters, capturing 2 high-ranking crime bosses successfully, completing 140 missions with the mounted police, and getting smaller-time robbers. She wasn't sure if that last part even counted, but she had done so much more, and just didn't want to list it all. The succubus was thrilled, standing at the bars, saying her old cellmate was now on the security team. She casually invited Veronica to chat, even blowing her a kiss, and asked her to take care. Veronica started to blush, but her new boss sternly shook his fist at her, warning her not to fall for the prisoner's little games. Veronica agreed, a bit confused, realizing she was actually a security guard now. A man's hands started clapping, and an older gentleman with glasses and a long mustache appeared at the door. He said he had expected Lord Aiden could run the prison well, even with fewer staff. Aiden turned and said he didn't expect to see Treasurer Duck here, and asked why he had visited. Light streamed through the window. The treasurer did some quick math and reported that taking into account that they needed 90 guards, and deducting the pay of those who were let go, the budget for Rose Prison would drop from $800,000 to $600,000. The deputy was shocked, since just keeping one magical force field going cost the prison £650,000. A voiceover explained that Rose Prison costs £800,000 to run. A view from above showed the prison under a massive magical shield. Most of the money went to maintaining this magical shield, which could, if needed, cover the whole city to stop prisoners from using magic if they broke out. This energy shield needed tons of power and cost $650,000 a month to maintain. The vampire stood looking displeased with her arms crossed. Next to her was a sign showing costs for food and supplies. The remaining $150,000 a month covered other prison expenses. The vampire complained indignantly, saying she hoped she wouldn't be forced to become a vegetarian since she needed fresh sustenance to live. Workers were fixing a wall. A sign next to them showed $55,000 a month went to silver and runes for building repairs. One worker mentioned that no one else dared to complain because he was pulling overtime to patch up a hole. Security stood opposite the cameras, next to a table of security costs. $15,000 a month was spent on guards' pay and uniforms. The issue was totally obvious. Deputy Aiden put on a calm face and said that even if every single guard quit, that money wouldn't be enough just for maintenance. Cutting the budget by $200,000 was a terrible idea. The treasurer raised his hand to calm the girl, explaining that she misunderstood. The shield didn't need the full amount of power to work perfectly. He figured that with Lord Aiden in charge, $450,000 less power would be just fine. The girl was furious, and the treasurer looked surprised. She yelled that they couldn't lower the power, or the city could be in danger. He insisted that he thought Lord Aiden's abilities were enough to handle a $200,000 budget cut. The treasurer approached the Lord's desk and said they had total faith in Lord Aiden, and he should contact them if there were issues. The girl turned to the Lord, asking what they should do now. Aiden looked thoughtful, but inside he was panicking. His mind was blank, which was impossible. Aiden said the girl was temporarily promoted and would manage all prison matters while he was gone. The girl was surprised. Leaning on the desk, the Lord held his head, saying he needed to figure out how to get through this situation. The girl, now wearing a white uniform, walked into the prison hallway. She took a deep breath, pulling on a glove. She wore tall boots, a white suit, a white hat, and a gun in a holster on her belt. The guards were shocked, saying they hadn't seen a uniform like that in ages. One of them said it was the deputy head of the prison's uniform. Adjusting her glove, Flora said she was now temporarily running the prison, while Lord Aiden handled other things. The pirate and the horse thief, looking roughed up, watched the guards from behind the bars. The pirate was surprised Aiden would just hand over his authority to someone else. The second girl replied that it seemed like he was just avoiding his problems and running away. Flora looked at the cells. Prisoners were yelling from everywhere, laughing, and saying the warden just ran away. They couldn't figure out why the guards should even bother with this job if they got paid so little. The deputy turned to Aiden, asking if they were facing any big problems. Aiden looked at her and said all the sudden changes, fewer guards, the weakening shield, budget cuts, weren't just random luck. Flora realized with dread that this was a full-blown plot against Rose Prison. She figured it was a much bigger conspiracy than just Mr. Anthony. The guards who arrived all got their letters on the same day. In every region, there was a group of people involved. The treasurer, who hadn't been around in forever, was distributing money. Shadows of wealthy people in uniforms suggested they were up against someone much more powerful than Anthony. Flora demanded that the pirate and the horse thief each get 20 strikes. The guards agreed, but they flipped her off and laughed, asking sarcastically if she thought those strikes would scare them. them. They warned that as soon as they got out, they would take revenge on her for everything. Flora ordered the ghost guard to hand the baton to Veronica, who would carry out the command. Veronica was caught off guard, but the guard gave her the baton. She asked if she'd have to pay if she broke it on the prisoners. The two girls started screaming, terrified that a werewolf's 20 strikes would be fatal. They yelled that Aiden hadn't been this harsh with them. Flora said no one cared if they perished in prison. It was time for them to understand that and stop making trouble in front of her if they didn't want to face the consequences. The guards dragged the prisoners into the hall, ordering them to stop resisting. The girls fought back, begging not to be punished and just to be allowed to speak their minds. The warden, holding his hands up, said there were no doctors in the prison, so surviving the punishment was all down to luck. The baton was raised. Guards lined both sides of the hall. Flora stood in the center with 4 guards in front of her, and Veronica began the punishment. Flora announced some staff changes. She turned to Azella, who slightly blushed and acknowledged her. The warden appointed the girl as the head of the first area, covering cells 1 to 100. Looking up at the higher levels, Flora assigned guard Haley to be in charge of the second area, from cell 101 to cell 200. Purple Hair sat on her bunk, resting her hand on her chin, thinking the screams sounded really pitiful. She wondered if Flora was always such a strict leader. She approached the bars but paused when a voice came from behind her. A woman said this was just in time because she was about to force the bars open herself. She wished the screaming would stop soon. A muscular girl with a scar on her nose and purple tattoos sat on a prison couch, arms crossed, her hands locked in huge engraved shackles. She said the noise was already hurting her ears. The witch extended her hand, and a hamster with lovely eyes scampered toward her. Looking at the rodent in her hand, the witch commented that due to the funding cuts, Aiden wouldn't be able to hold on to power here for long. She asked what the necromancer thought, who was sitting on her bed, reading a book. The necromancer, still glued to her book, asked the witch why she needed an outside opinion if she was going to leave anyway. From another cell, the witch replied that since they were practically neighbors, it would be weird if Asena suddenly told Aiden about her plan. The necromancer took her eyes off her book, turned to the wall, and said that a deal was a deal. She promised that as soon as Aiden lost his power, she would be out of there, maybe even faster than the witch herself. The prisoners were lined up, and the girl with bunny ears looked back. Flora, looking very cross, yelled at her not to look around. Standing between 2 guards, Flora raised her hand and said that all prisoners would be moving in groups of 10. Veronica looked at Flora, who was standing right in front of her, and shyly said she understood. Someone approached Veronica from behind, startling her. The girl behind her said that Flora was the person Aiden trusted the most. Veronica was impressed, recognizing the girl as the first district superintendent, Isabella. The girl, wearing clothes similar to Flora's uniform but in black, raised her hand and said not to be so formal. The guards could just call her Bella. She mentioned she hadn't expected Flora to hire a werewolf, but now she felt much better. Veronica rubbed the back of her head and gave a sweet smile. She asked Bella to look out for her, hoping to be like her someday and help Lord Aiden. Veronica blushed, surprised by Bella's intense look. She passionately told Bella she hoped to help the Lord save the prison. Bella's expression softened. She patted Veronica on the shoulder and said they needed to head out. Today's job was monitoring the food service, and someone would switch out with them later. Veronica smiled and said everything was fine. A cart full of prisoners rode through the gate and onto the prison grounds. Haley, the second district superintendent, wearing the same black uniform as Bella, asked why they were bringing in new prisoners when they already had their hands full with the ones they had. Standing opposite a guard, she examined a new prisoner's file. Haley was confused why this person was transferred here. She was a smuggler. Those types weren't sent here anymore, and she would just take up space. The guard replied he couldn't do anything because the transfer was an official order. The new girl sat on a bench in the cart, smiling sadly. The cage door opened, and a new prisoner, already in a prison uniform, entered. The purple-haired girl on the bunk asked if she was new. She said yes. The necromancer closed her book, stood up, wrapped herself in a blanket like a cloak. The succubus said this was already her 8th day here. She claimed the guards were her greatest affection, like sisters she had played with since she was little. She walked up to the new girl, looked her right in the eyes, and told her to call her big sister, and then she could help her. The girl called her older sister. The succubus winked and smiled, promising to give her the laundry later. The new girl gave a strange smile and agreed to do the washing. Then it was sunset over the prison fence. Someone set the curtains on fire in a building. The shadow of a man watched from the window with a smile as the fabric burned. Veronica smelled the burning and said a blaze was starting. They turned and saw the fire up ahead. The guards rushed toward the fire. The guard next to Flora screamed that it was a sleeping area. The girl's prisoners stood quietly. Flora suddenly spun around, fear clear on her face. The werewolf turned to look behind her. Some of the creatures had broken free. The purple-haired girl in her cell said it looked like a root-out had been opened. Huge creatures with wings, claws, and horns roared at the guards. The creatures charged toward the 2 guards. One guard shouted that they had to hold the line so the others didn't also run away, but before she could finish, the second guard bolted. The guards ran away in terror. Flora demanded they come back immediately, but they yelled they didn't want to perish. The purple-haired girl, holding her chin, said this was expected since Flora had just taken the job, and her authority wasn't high enough yet. The girl watched the fleeing guards from the bars. A girl girl in a black uniform screamed that the military needed to hurry because a big dispute had broken out in the dining hall. This was District 3 Superintendent, Jenny. A tattooed girl on the next bed asked if the prison was going to fall apart. The second girl, raising her index finger, replied that Flora's small losses in this role wouldn't matter much in the grand scheme of things, and they just needed to wait for the main troublemaker to show up. Aggressive creatures ran roaring at the guards. The werewolf crouched down, shielding Flora and 2 guards. Lord Aiden appeared, landing with a loud sound. The creatures instantly backed away when they saw him. The Lord stood behind the guards and the creatures in front. He wished them a good evening and politely called them all ladies. The gate opened. The guards were surprised as 3 prisoners who had caused a disturbance on the street were brought into the building. They were chained and closely guarded. Lord Aiden, with a guard escort, looked at the prisoners. The elf, holding the bars, watched the Lord. Aiden calmly asked if they could explain what had happened. Leaning on his cane, the warden said he only stepped away for a moment to drink tea and think about why the guards quit. But now the prisoners dared to attack the guards. One of the prisoners behind bars said Aiden was no longer able to manage the prison. She wondered how long he would keep up the act, especially since security had been weakened. Aiden turned to her cell and asked why she was acting so cocky. She angrily bared her teeth. She didn't like the comparison and yelled that she would bring Aiden down. The prisoner became completely enraged and shouted at the Lord that he was a blonde maniac and his strength would be enough to overwhelm him here. Lowering his head, Aiden said she sounded quite sure of herself. He stated he would give them one chance. Drawing a circle with a knife in a box, Aiden thought that managing 1,000 prisoners required so many guards that it would be impossible to hire them quickly. The Lord held up a box with a sleeping smiley face on it, but if he brought in some of the inmates as volunteers to act as guards, so to speak, he could solve 2 problems at once. Aiden placed 3 boxes with round holes on top. On the sides were drawn sleeping, loving, and angry smileys. He thought it was a major gamble, but he had no other option. In this situation, it was all or nothing. Aiden stood in front of the guards and said that over the next 3 days, they would have to unlock all the cells, except for the highest risk prisoners. The prisoners would be allowed to move around the prison freely. This was being done to see how they would behave. With a slightly nervous look, Aiden said they would have a chance to escape, but he hoped they wouldn't let him down. The guards behind him chuckled, saying the warden seemed furious. The second one replied that they were unlucky, but would at least get a small break. One of the prisoners said he had completely stopped taking the guards seriously and was relaxing. Medusa angrily replied that this was true, and Aiden was probably just pretending to be important. Otherwise, he wouldn't have just let them out. The tigress said they needed to take his life as best they could and get ready for a confrontation. Lord Aiden addressed Flora and Veronica near the bars. The new prisoner watched what was happening, thinking there would be total disorder if this went wrong, and wondered what Lord Aiden was plotting. Turning to the crouching succubus, she called her sister and asked if she could learn something from her. The succubus told her to ask. Smiling slyly, the new girl asked about a prisoner named Evans, also known as the cleaner of bad deeds. The succubus turned around with a look of annoyance. The new girl looked surprised. The succubus said she felt something was off if the new girl was trying to find out about other prisoners. She asked why she needed the information. Smiling broadly and clasping her hands, the new girl said she was just curious because this girl was the biggest troublemaker, with many stories told about her. The succubus turned away, and the new girl immediately smiled sarcastically. Succubus said she thought the new girl wanted a new mentor. The new girl replied that was never her intention. She would always be her little sister. The succubus said it wouldn't have worked out for her anyway. She dismissed the new girl, saying a privileged prisoner like her didn't need ordinary people like her. The new girl opened her mouth in surprise and asked what a privileged prisoner meant. While the new girl was giving the succubus a massage, the succubus read her magazine. Raising her thumb, she said that girl was the most privileged of all, like Aiden's own daughter. He not only visited her daily but also taught her to read and write. The succubus added that she wasn't jealous since her relationship with Aiden was more like being a guardian. Squinting angrily, she remembered stroking Evans's head. She smiled slyly from under her hood, telling the girl that there were people who wanted to harm them, and she needed to act first. The girl agreed. A crowd of fighters watched the girl and yelled that they wanted to finish her. Energy built up at the girl's fingertips. They charged at her, screaming and armed. Evans covered her face with her hands. The projectiles bounced off her hands. She focused the energy in her hands. Her mother considered her the ultimate creation. The girl pushed the air away with her hands, and all the fighters were hurled away with great force. They all were surrounded by light. The fighters screamed with discomfort in their eyes and bodies. The girl turned and said they were done. With a furious look, her mother said it was a wonderful job and her daughter was the best. She laughed darkly. Skeletons that hadn't completely turned to ash glowed around the girl. She thought the Lord was an unethical person for taking her daughter. She thought the girl belonged to her and squeezed Succubus's shoulder tightly. The succubus pulled away, shouting that it hurt and that she seemed determined to end her. The other girl apologized, looking guilty. She said she had been thinking and it wouldn't happen again. Aiden, sitting across the table from Flora in his office, said this was the first stage of his plan and asked if she had questions. prisoners. Flora, looking calm, said everything was clear, and she needed to focus now on who was behind the conspiracy. She said she would handle everything for tomorrow's plan. Lord Aiden's shadow said that tomorrow, when the prisoners were at lunch, they would meet in a secret spot. Flora opened the door, and Veronica was standing behind her. The Lord walked down the corridor, going the opposite way from the girls. Flora told Veronica that the Lord asked her to give her something, saying he was a little embarrassed. Veronica replied she was ready for any assignment. Flora said it wasn't a task at all. She whispered in her ear that when Veronica transformed, she tore her pants. Veronica turned around and saw a huge tear on her backside. She was shocked. Flora smiled wickedly and told her to get herself a new uniform. The jellyfish's cell was opened, and she was stunned. Leaning out of the cage, she asked in surprise if they were really opening the cells. She couldn't understand anything, and thought this wasn't the only odd thing happening. All the prisoners were shocked and looked ahead. Even the main prison gates were open. They wondered what Aiden was doing, and who would be the first to try to get out. A girl with green hair looked at the crowd and yelled at them to hurry up, smiling broadly and holding a camera. She told them to rush through the gates. They would finally be free. The trio of prisoners were talking. The lizard nudged the Medusa on the shoulder, and the tigress held her other arm. The lizard asked her to go first since she was the bravest one, holding her hands folded on her chest. Medusa nervously said she wasn't totally sure. The tigress replied, surprised, that she used to be so confident. Two of the trio insisted the Medusa would go first, and they would follow right behind. The Medusa made a grumpy face, remembering the last time the Lord tied her up with her own snakes, put his hand in her mouth, and asked ironically if she wanted to bite again. Then he threw her off a cliff into intense heat, saying if she could hold out until sunrise, he would pull her back up. A creature was pulled by her hair toward the gate. She screamed that she didn't want any more punishment from Aiden because her back still ached. The lizard kept pulling her, yelling that she couldn't back out since she started this. A chicken screamed at the top of its lungs. The girls turned to look. A frantic chicken was running around the yard. The cook with a ladle shouted that he needed to catch the chicken because it was their dinner. Isabella tried to catch the chicken but fell to the ground. The chicken broke free and kept running. The prisoners pointed and yelled that a chicken had gone through the gate. Isabella screamed at it to stop. The chicken turned around outside the gate and crowded. The creatures were happy that the chicken passed, meaning they didn't have to be afraid. The chicken fell into a magical circle. A second later, the circle exploded, along with the chicken. The cooked chicken fell to the ground. The prisoners asked in horror what that was. Isabella yelled furiously that she didn't set up the circle for a chicken to step on it. The cook asked why there was such a hazardous thing right at the prison gates. Turning to him, Isabella, holding her neck, said they had plenty of rabbits for free testing, and she was helping Lord Aiden. The prison guard personnel file for Isabella. Name, Isabella. Race, human. Age, 26. Position, superintendent of the 1st District. Mission application. I heard there are many magical circles in Rose Prison created by true masters. I want to learn how to make the same ones. Experience, Imperial Academy of Magic. Top student of the Magical Circles Department. The lizard pointed at Isabella and asked how many circles she had installed there. Isabella looked away and stuck out her tongue, asking the prisoner to guess. A winged prisoner stepped forward. She grabbed the elf with her claw, lifted her off the ground, and said since there was so much worthless stuff in the prison, wouldn't it be better to throw it out like bags of sand to break the circles? The elf screamed for help. The succubus and the rabbit-eared girl were scared, begging her not to do it. The half-bird creature lowered her eyes, and they told her to let the elf go. The tigress, holding her hands on her chest, said there weren't many circles here, meaning they could just rush at them in a big group, and they wouldn't have to harm anyone. Holding the elf in front of her, the winged creature said they were criminals. Swinging the elf, she shouted that they had to show what would happen to Aiden's helpers. They ran up to the bird from both sides, striking her legs and wings, causing her to drop the little elf. The bird crouched down in discomfort as the elf fell. Haley, holding her sword behind her back, said she was sorry, but prisoners who didn't want to leave couldn't be involved in this. Jenny, still in the same stance, told everyone they needed to remember they were still in prison and should watch what they said, and did. The security file for the Sword Sisters, Haley and Jenny, read, race, human, age, 27, position, level 2 and 3 superintendent. Job application, our boss ordered us to help contain the troublemakers and keep things calm at Rose Prison. Experience, since the boss wants to stay private, we can only say we are great with a sword. The succubus was holding the elf on her shoulder. A red-haired girl with a monocle raised her hand and smiled. This was Mo Yi, the District 4 superintendent. She announced that any prisoners who didn't want to get involved could go back to their cells, but those who stayed in the prison yard would be treated like people on the front lines. The prisoners decided to go back inside. The tigress turned around, arms crossed, and said the yard was much cleaner now. She added that they should figure out a plan to deal with Aiden. A voice told them to behave. The tigress spun around in horror and dropped to her knees. She said she never expected to see Miss Austen here, and would never dare to be bold in front of her. A white-haired girl with her hair piled up stood among a crowd of prisoners and wondered where she'd heard the name Austen. People in the crowd whispered that she was Princess Austin Marbus, the ruler of the Beastkin. They said it was no surprise that Philippa the tigress was kneeling because Austin was her mistress. Philippa stayed kneeling. Her mistress, Austin, smiled with her hands in the air and asked her to stand up because kneeling wouldn't make up for the mistake of not protecting her family's honor or for getting defeated by weak people. Pointing to the gate, Philippa excitedly offered to be the frontline person so Austin could escape. Austin smiled slyly and replied there was no need, she was just here to have some fun. She added that this breakout attempt would absolutely kick off a big war. A white-haired girl and a brown-haired woman, both with symbols on their bodies, stood next to the new girl. The brown-haired woman said goodbye and told her to keep up the good work. The new girl watched them leave, thinking the symbols on their bodies meant they served ancient, powerful entities. The new girl remembered her teacher talking about families who received favors from ancient, powerful beings, giving them powers far beyond normal people's understanding. Any one of them had the power to take down an entire city. A massive hand with symbols hung over the city in her mind. She thought it would be much easier for her if someone else handled the escape for her. The new girl turned around. The cook suggested that the good prisoners who weren't running away should help out in the kitchen. The creatures asked what exactly they needed help with. The cook tapped her hand with a ladle and said they needed help prepping ingredients and making desserts so everyone could get a chance to taste them. She added that some security staff quit because the food was bad, and that made her sad as a chef. Two prisoners debated who would go. One decided to try, but the witch pushed her away with her chest, shouting that she was going to the kitchen. The other prisoners were shocked by her eagerness. The witch crossed her arms, acting like a sweet girl, and claimed she was a model prisoner and also had great talent with her hands. She promised that while she was in the kitchen, no one would bother the cook. The cook smiled and said that was wonderful. The necromancer was surprised at how saintly the witch was pretending to be. Holding her book, she pointed out that the crying girls in the back were there first, and that she didn't even want to hear about desserts. The witch angrily told her to be quiet. The deputy approached the necromancer from behind and asked why she was still there. The necromancer replied she might be able to help the deputy. The deputy said the librarian had quit and no one had replaced him yet. If the necromancer wanted, she could take the job and spend all her time in the reading room instead of her cell. The necromancer raised her hand, jumped up and shouted that it was amazing news. The witch looked at her and said that she was pretending to be a saint now. The new girl commented that it was a small world since she didn't expect to see this pair here. It wasn't surprising that the witch was so upset that she even started bragging about her great talent. She thought she understood Aiden's plan. He put his safest chess pieces, the necromancer and witch, in the most vulnerable areas, which were the shadows of his guard and deputy. The uncertainty around the gate was keeping the prisoners afraid to rush out. The lonely gate, with no one guarding it, meant that even though they were let out, they had really just gotten bigger cells. Judging by the map she got from Anthony, there were still weak spots in this prison. The prison map showed the main gate, which was a hazard, was watched by Isabella. A statue was watched by the Sword Sisters. To their left was the reading room, where Asena, the necromancer, was located. In the center was a building with cameras. Below on the right was a dining room with Daly the cook and a sports field. On the left was a neglected area, which was the biggest weak spot. The magical shield and current number of guards couldn't protect this large area. There was an empty wall with sharp wire. The new girl thought her daughter was also one of the golden prisoners. With a naughty smile, she wondered if her daughter would be there. Evan sat at a table with a toy rabbit. Aiden, sitting opposite her, said class was over for today and they would meet again tomorrow. She said goodbye to him. Behind the Lord was a massive barrel. Two prisoners ran up to him shouting that they smelled something right. One of them, a muscular woman, pointed at a tattoo on her body and yelled that the warden had alcohol. She told the boss to wait up. Aiden looked at her and thought he had successfully lured her in. Tapping the barrel, he said she had a good nose, and the security team needed this barrel for their overtime work. She was disappointed it was only for security. He pointed to an empty piece of land and said he was going to grow food for the cafeteria there, but he was worried the prisoners would make a mess of it, and wanted to hire guards for overtime work to deal with it. She enthusiastically said she was ready to help. The girl asked if Aiden read her file. The prisoner used to be a leader of hired fighters. Looking at her, Aiden said he thought her name was Jin Jia. Holding the barrel, she smiled and said he was right. She asked why he didn't just give the job to her, if it didn't matter who did the work. She was willing to do it for alcohol. She said she needed money, but a barrel of good wine would be a fantastic payment, as she hadn't had any in a long time and really wanted more wine. Aiden said he could save money this way, and gave her a chance to prove herself. The prisoner smiled broadly, and said the land still needed a lot of work, and would take a long time, requiring many workers. She was ready to do it for another barrel of wine, if he had it, and if Aiden would give it to her. Smiling back, he said he had enough wine to satisfy her, but time was short and the task wasn't easy. Aiden hinted that she should gather more people to handle such a massive task more easily. She couldn't work on such a huge area alone. Her friend got what Lord Aiden was suggesting. Rising from her chair, her face showed she understood his plan. Jin Jia turned to her friend, holding the barrel of wine, and asked what kind of games these were. Looking sadly at Aiden, the friend thought maybe he wanted them to bring someone else, but then they would become a target for the rioting prisoners. The new girl watched from the corner and realized who was in front of her. The newcomer realized the woman with the huge axe standing in front of many fighters was the unstoppable enforcer, the producer of a dozen mercenary groups who overpowered 1,000 vampire knights. Standing near the wall, the new girl put her hand on Evans's head and said Aiden was a smart guy for deciding to offer incentives to prisoners to fill the staff shortage. She told Evans she needed some time and that it wasn't the moment to wake her. The girl looked down blankly. Her mother said they should wait for the right moment. She was about to leave but turned to look at her mother. The new girl responded by talking about the moment when they would be able to eliminate the troublemakers. A guard watched the prisoner as she picked up a stone from the ground. From behind, she lifted her t-shirt, showing a massive scar on her lower abdomen. It opened up, looking like a mouth with a spike in the center and teeth on the sides. She held the stone next to that huge mouth. The guard turned to her and told the prisoner to leave quickly because no one was there yet. The prisoner tucked in her t-shirt and quickly walked toward the guard. Turning to the guard, she said with a wide smile that she needed one more thing. She asked if the guard had any prisoners in mind who would be a good fit for her. The guard replied that the bloody princess, Ophelia, might be suitable. She was in cell 66 on the second floor of Rose Prison. The guard and the new girl walked toward the prison building. The guard felt that Ophelia had tried to escape last month, but failed, and was utterly embarrassed by Lord Aiden. The new girl could show Ophelia some sincerity, and then she might agree to become her partner. A clump of red liquid flew to the ground. Ophelia shouted that she was the bloody princess, and, holding a jug of red liquid in her hand, said they couldn't feed her pigs liquid because she came from noble vampire lineage. As she left, the guard turned around and said Ophelia was lucky she didn't get garlic juice every day, as punishment for trying to break free. Squeezing the vessel, Ophelia yelled to stop talking nonsense and tell Aiden he'd better not sleep easily at night. The hand holding the vessel started to glow. Ophelia dropped it, spilling the liquid. Holding her hand in discomfort, she screamed, furious that her dinner was ruined. Someone pressed down on the vessel, and all the liquid splashed out. The new girl was standing on the vessel. In a fury, the vampire revealed her fangs and snarled. She grabbed the new girl by the neck and violently threw her to the ground. Her red eyes burned with anger. She was absolutely livid. Turning to the new girl, she asked how an ordinary commoner dared to touch her bat-like, yet still red, dinner. She declared that the new girl herself would be the replacement. The new girl said she didn't care because the bad spell on Ophelia would take her life. Ophelia was confused. She asked how she knew that. A spike emerged from the hole in the new girl's stomach, quickly rising and piercing Ophelia's stomach with force. Ophelia yelped in discomfort. The new girl covered Ophelia's mouth with her hand to stop the vampire from biting her. She told Ophelia to be quiet. The new girl's essence went straight into the vampire's mouth. She told Ophelia to bite her, and the spell wouldn't work. The essence entered the prisoner's body, and she developed imaginary red-tinged wings. She realized her strength was starting to come back. The new girl looked at Ophelia, said her ability was to remove binding spells from prisoners, and invited Ophelia to join her. The deputy stood next to a magic circle with her arms crossed, thinking that since Bella created the ventilation system, it was no surprise it was so cold in here. She climbed the stairs to the door on the second floor, and thought the Lord had called it a secret place. She opened the door. He asked her to watch out for traps. Standing next to the valves, she said she understood why he did it. Standing at a table with papers, he said it was just a safety measure because prisoners were not simple. Next to the grate that led to the secret place, Aiden appeared with a snake that was using its sense of smell. In the dining room, Medusa sat at the table with a ladle and said no one was outside the window, though she thought Lord Aiden would be watching them. The witch at the next table showed a mouse to the cook and asked her not to be afraid because it was her pet. Aiden looked at the path leading to the dining room and said the prisoners had lowered their guard so they could move on to the next step. He told the deputy he noticed 3 types of prisoners in the room. Monsters of various kinds sat at the dinner table and aggressively ate food. Aiden said this was a group of intense people whose instincts prevented them from being educated. He tossed a piece of paper with the Banshee's signature into the box with the angry smiley face. Aiden called this group the Rebels. Little Jalala carried 2 plates of food, stuffing bread into her pockets. The rest of the prisoners sat quietly at an empty table. Aiden put this group in the second category, those who, for one reason or another, had to stay in Rose Prison. He threw a piece of paper with Jalala's name into the box with the sleeping smiley. This group was classified as neutral. Jinjia covered her face in embarrassment while her friend sat opposite another prisoner. Aiden put them in the third group, those who were forced out here by the outside world and felt better here than outside the walls and behaved well. He threw a piece of paper with Jinjia's name into the last box with a smiling emoji. These were model prisoners. Looking at the prisoners in the cafeteria, he said the plan was to create a unified faction and find the leader. To do this, he needed to pit the especially dangerous prisoners from the red category against the exemplary prisoners from the blue category. Ants crawled along a hill on the ground in front of the prison. Ophelia held the red substance in her hands and used her power to change it into a sword. The Medusa looked in admiration at Ophelia, who could create a weapon from her essence, confirming that her binding spell was indeed broken. She asked them to help quickly so she could get her strength back, then escaping from here would be easier. Putting away the weapon, Ophelia asked them not to worry since her boss first needed to create a special concoction, which took time. The new girl approached them and explained what kind of concoction they needed to follow her commands. Standing in front of a group of angry prisoners, she said they should involve as many people as possible while she gathered materials, and all of this must be kept a secret. The lizard asked who she was since they didn't even know her name. The tigress, arms crossed, said she knew her as a major smuggler. Lowering her head, the new girl said she would show them something. Worms emerged from her feet, grew massive, and reached out to the group of prisoners. Medusa screamed in shock. The new girl stretched out her purple worms, and bases and claws developed on her hands. She amazed everyone with her appendages. The prisoners screamed in fear, not understanding what she was doing. Her leeches flew off the prisoners' bodies, and her torso below her stomach looked like the body of an ant. She asked them to calm down, and explained that this was done to be safe. They could simply buy the counterspell potion as soon as they got away from here. The Medusa also had worms coming out of his hand. He threatened the others, saying that if they didn't follow the new girl's orders, or reveal her identity, they would face the ultimate consequence. Two prisoners chatted about how great the food was in the cafeteria, and how they wished they could eat like that every day. A guard stopped them, pointing to a folder. He said they had been assigned to new cells and needed to go with him. The prisoners looked up in confusion, seeing others already moving. The guard showed them a different cell, ordering the first-floor prisoners to come over. A guard walked into a cell and said this prisoner could be released. He demanded she come out and vacate the space. The prisoner with a scar under her eye said there must be a mistake. She was supposed to stay for another month. The deputy watched as the guard explained to the inmate that she was on temporary release and could talk to the warden if she was unhappy, but she needed to hurry up. The deputy realized the obedient prisoners had been moved and wondered what Veronica was up to. The lizard was chatting with a tough, green-skinned prisoner. The half-bird was standing with the half-boar prisoner. Others in the hostile group wondered if they truly had a secret advantage that would help them get free. The half-boar said she understood and would follow orders. A guard addressed the group, telling them to return to their cells because it was getting late. The half-bird asked why they had to go back when they had 3 days of free time. Veronica stepped in and said the guards needed rest, and it was better to go without any fuss. The tigress showed her claws and demanded everyone go back to their cells without arguing with the guards. All the prisoners moved forward calmly. Veronica talked to the deputy, saying everyone had returned, and, in her opinion, things were going smoothly. The deputy asked if even the major troublemakers listened, which surprised her, but she reminded Veronica to stay alert. The half-boar gripped the cell bars, yelling that her cell was occupied by someone else. Others also noticed the changes. She asked what this meant and where they were supposed to sleep. The Sword Sisters arrived with a group of guards. They asked what the commotion was about and explained that their bad behavior led to the cell change. The guards facing the monsters demanded they back away and take the free cells. The half-bird looked angry and asked why she should follow those orders. The Medusa spoke up, saying this was actually a good thing. Everyone turned to her. She explained that it would allow them to talk and bring more people into their plan. Ophelia told her to be quiet. The tigress put on a sweet face and said she would go to her cell right away. She wondered why Aiden gathered the rebels in one spot and what he gained from it. Her eyes widened as she remembered the special camera. She pointed at the camera, which was painted black, and asked why it looked like that. Anthony told her that was for the most dangerous prisoners, but he thought they were just a bunch of crazy people who didn't listen to anyone. He added that the room was specially padded so no one could hear them. Behind the door of cell 8004, a chained prisoner scratched with her claws. The lizard asked if she wanted to join them, but the prisoner couldn't hear or understand the offer. Others warned that talking too loudly could attract security. Another prisoner asked why they weren't told earlier, as they had already shouted out secrets. The half-bird screamed in her cell, holding her head, saying she wanted to sleep peacefully but couldn't because of the shouting from all over the prison. The new girl remembered the special camera locations and realized Aiden was just playing games. She thought he was planning something serious, but he was just wasting time. She heard from neighboring cells that if they were always fed so well, they were happy to live here forever. The answer came from another cell. They were attacked every time they left, and it was better to be here. This group didn't understand why they should try to break free if they were safe here and didn't suffer from hunger, unlike those outside the walls. The new girl was shocked. She finally understood. She thought it was simple and that everyone here thought alike. The deputy standing nearby told the werewolf that this was Aiden's order. On the first floors of this model prison were the model prisoners with great behavior. The people sitting here didn't understand why anyone would disturb the peace and were content to stay because conditions outside were awful. Outside, people had no food and lived in constant fear, unlike the people inside Rose Prison, where they had found companionship. Below them were the neutral groups. Some people didn't like their stay but didn't complain too loudly, only sometimes grumbling about the conditions. The guards' actions were small issues that didn't significantly change their life here. The third level level was the rebels. They were constantly unhappy, and now someone was demanding the guards be changed. They hated the prison maintenance and the security team's work, and most of all, they hated Lord Aiden. Right in front of the deputy and Veronica was the central chamber, where prisoners specially chosen by the Lord were located, the clever advisor, A, and her friend, the mercenary captain, Jinjia. The deputy turned to the central chamber and asked if Jinjia had started looking for volunteers for the outside work yet. Jinjia replied that Aiden expected a list from her for his office. She and A talked while standing next to each other. Jinjia said she was now Aiden's assistant and had to look for work volunteers. Jinjia added, this was expected from the warden. When she was about to drag a huge barrel of wine to drink it quickly, A pointed her finger at her, warning that Aiden was looking for people on the front lines, and since the rebels were very strong, they needed to be careful for their own safety. Jinjia asked if she should turn down the Lord's assignment. A said she should wait as the situation had shifted. Looking around the prison, she noticed that the prisoners had been seated in a special way. The giant Julie, sitting next to her, said she smelled alcohol on Jinjia and asked where she managed to get it. Around them were either people with short sentences or those seeking people who would be free from trouble. Mandy approached them about working outdoors, playfully saying she hoped there would be handsome guys there. A said that everyone in these cells called this place their home and had no intention of escaping. Prisoners from neighboring cells asked what was going on with Aiden. They said they had lived in this prison for a long time and deserved to know all the local gossip and stories. A thought there were probably more quiet prisoners than they knew, meaning Aiden didn't want them looking for people for the front lines. Aiden smiled, selecting candidates based on what benefited him. 2 mugs of alcohol clinked together. Below them were prisoners engaged in farm work. Alcohol dripped from the mugs, creating ripples in the water. Shadows of prisoners filled the center. Jinjia sat on a chair, and a prisoner knelt near her. To her right, another prisoner was holding a tray with a lid. A realized that Aiden was building a force that would help him stand up to the troublemakers. She said that Aiden had thought things through, and realized that Jinjia, the mercenary captain, was the best candidate to lead the chosen team. Jinjia looked at her friend in disbelief, saying that although being boss sounded nice, they would still be Aiden's helpers. She asked A if she remembered how their team was destroyed and how all her fighters were taken out, leaving only her and A alive on the field. She added that bosses always get rid of their dogs once they are no longer needed. A rubbed her head and said she knew that, but things were different now. First, their forces were roughly equal, and their boss was on their side, allowing them to attack. Second, the rebels' goal was just to get out of the prison, so they wouldn't purposely fight with them and might just let them go. Jinjia looked down at Aya. Aya explained that the advantage in this situation was clear, and if they could convince the others, everything would work out. She asked Jinjia if she wanted to be called boss. Jinjia closed her eyes and sighed, resigned. Raising her hands, she shouted that she could offer them a drink since she got a job and needed help. Someone from outside asked to join. The succubus ran toward the cage, her eyes lighting up, screaming not to be forgotten and to be taken along. The new girl thought that Aiden had decided to change the local way of life, but she thought this was okay, since a small break was nothing compared to the chance to get away. She looked forward, thinking that if she could get the attention of the key figures in the prison, they would all become useless. The cell she was looking at held a witch. The new girl thought that the potion and many like-minded people would force Daly to join them. The witch hit the girl in the face, and she fell to the ground. Standing over her, the witch said arrogantly that she would no longer be her mentor since she was vile and starting today was kicked out of the witch community, the coven. The new girl cried while sitting on the ground, saying she used people in need for her experiments, and no one would know about it. Looking down at her, the witch angrily said the girl hadn't expressed regret for her actions, meaning she had no chance for redemption, and the Lamia would arrive soon. A creature with a tail, green hair, and 2 pairs of arms crawled forward, screaming that the new girl was a pathetic scoundrel. Sitting on the ground in front of the witch, the new girl tried to argue she wasn't guilty. She grabbed a broom lying nearby, jumped on it, and flew away from the monster. But a creature with a huge mouth and teeth yelled after her not to run because she would catch her anyway. It opened its huge mouth and released gigantic green energy blasts. The witch fell from the force of the blasts and screamed in horror as she dropped. Daly looked ahead and thought she fell right into the forbidden area. A girl fell from the sky, landing next to a statue of a 2-faced girl wrapped in red thread. The new girl finished her thought, thinking her teacher would not only be surprised she survived, but would also be amazed at her knowledge of the secret divine technique. Holding her hand on her stomach, the new girl thought that the 7 greatest witches would bow before her. Behind the new girl and the succubus, a white mouse crawled out from under a rag, having overheard their conversation. Aiden opened the box, undoing the wrapping with 2 fingers. Sitting at the table, Aiden said these were her personal items that were taken from her when she came to Rose Prison. He congratulated bounty hunter Carol on her release today. A blue-haired girl with a cross-shaped scar under her eye looked directly at Aiden with confusion, curiously asking why he was treating her so well. The prisoner sat in front of the warden with her head bowed. Her certificate of exemption read, name, Carol, gender, female, race, human, sentence, 1 year in prison for attacking a security guard while intoxicated, released, due to expiration of sentence. Aiden asked her to control herself next time and not get into trouble anymore. Raising her head, the blue-haired girl opened her mouth in surprise, asking if she was really being released. All the prisoners told her she would have to pay for such an offense. She slapped the Lord in the face in anger. He said he didn't like low blows, which caused the girl to scream at him to perish. Former prisoner changed into her hunter's clothes and, standing at the door, turned to the Lord. She told him that all year she had only seen punishments, and no one had ever been released early. She figured he wanted something from her in exchange for shortening her sentence. A man's hand placed several gold coins on the table. He asked her to tell him more about the job of a bounty hunter. The new girl walked through the dining room. The voices of girls sitting there could be heard from different sides. One asked the other if she said her name was Jinjia. Another replied that she already felt good here, and if she also got the chance to drink, this place was paradise. The new girl made a wicked expression. She said the girls hadn't seen each other in a long time. The witch was sitting at the table, stirring the stew with a spoon. The new girl, holding a tray of food, addressed her as Mrs. Daly to get her attention. Looking up at the new girl, the witch smiled. She apologized for not recognizing her right away. She heard the new girl had been busy with motherly duties for several years, so she was caught up in worries. The embittered girl told the witch that it was enough with those comments, because if she really knew about her daughter, she should understand why the new girl was there. She said she was ready to help the witch, like teaching her teacher. Daly smiled broadly at her. She explained that she felt pretty good here and it was much cleaner than in the coven, so she didn't understand why the new girl thought it was bad for the witch here. The new girl asked the witch if having a good time meant being the warden's pet. She said she didn't understand why Daly was so forgiving toward him, but she pointed out that he didn't give her the best job at all. The witch raised her finger and touched the bottom of her hat. She told the new girl she was very observant. She told her she knew about Daly's carefulness and distrust of everyone. Leaning on her hand, the witch sitting at the table watched a huge purple tentacle. The new girl said she wanted to prove she was sincere and wanted to show it to her. The warden smiled widely, looking forward. He was happy to see such a large number of prisoners who wanted to volunteer because 202 prisoners were enough for his purpose. A liquid maker with potatoes was set up against the backdrop of shadows working the ground. A man told the prisoners the plan. The goal was to prepare a plot for growing potatoes. He claimed they would not only be able to supply the cafeteria with them, but would also learn how to make distilled liquid from them. Knowing this, the prisoners could earn a living and find something to do after they were released. Jinjia smiled widely and pointed forward. Her advisor stood behind her with a tense face. Jinjia enthusiastically said the liquid was a great idea, and he shouldn't worry because she would keep everything under control. The warden, standing against a background of shadows and books, put a piece of paper on the table. He replied that there was a small problem. No one was going to buy the seeds. The prisoners looked surprised and confused. The warden said buying the seeds was up to them. He demanded they leave the prison, buy the seeds and return. Standing opposite the Lord at his office desk, the advisor didn't understand how she could leave prison so calmly. Jinjia asked the man if he was afraid they would run away. Closing his eyes, he smiled widely at them and said that he trusted the girls. A guard knocked on the open door. Next to him, the frizzy hair of a short elf was sticking out. The man announced that he had found them an assistant, reporting that an elf prisoner had arrived. The overseer explained that elves knew a lot about plants, and she would help them pick the right potatoes to plant. A sign was posted, "Labor prisoners of Rose Prison, keep away." A group of 5 shocked, chained prisoners stared ahead, their mouths hanging open in surprise. Bella smiled at them, telling them they needed to hurry back, or the magic shield could finish them. Shadowy creatures looked down at the city from above, amazed that they were allowed out so calmly. They thought they must be dreaming, that this moment wasn't real. The new girl revealed that the stinger above the affected egg was part of the secret art of prosperity she learned in the Forbidden Zone. A chick suddenly hatched from the egg, forcefully breaking the shell, and instantly grew feathers, becoming an adult chicken. The girl said that anything she touched immediately started to grow incredibly fast. Looking at a diagram of the magic circle, she explained that if she used this technique on the shield, it would suffer structural damage from expanding. An enchanted tree with faces on its trunk held a purple potion in a test tube. The prisoner continued, saying her potion was tested and guaranteed to work. It was a magic drink popular on the black market, and the chicken was her test subject. The chicken was struck by the new girl's stinger. She knew about the witch's deal with the Lord. She knew that as soon as the witch broke the contract, the power would take her life, but her technique could solve the problem. The new girl looked at the affected chicken, which now had a lump on its side and was screaming in pain. She explained that when the object used with the potion reached its maximum growth, it would split. A clone chicken popped out of the tumor on the original chicken. The new girl smiled slyly, showing the witch 2 chickens with different colors. She claimed the witch would have a new body, which would help her resist the curse. She asked if Mrs. Daly was happy with this outcome. The witch smiled maliciously and demanded, for the sake of their teacher-student relationship, that the new girl leave the dining room. Then she would would pretend she didn't see or hear anything. The girl was stunned by Daly's reaction. The prisoner started to laugh darkly. She said there was no friendship between a teacher and a student. The new girl, putting on a wide, sinister smile, looked straight at the witch and said the best idea would be to accept her offer. However, she realized the witch's plan was to wait until the rebels and the Lord started fighting, hoping they would just take each other out. Biting her finger, the witch smiled and said the student wasn't so rude and smart before. She laughed back and said that in the forbidden zone where she ended up, she couldn't rely just on her cleverness to survive. Shadows of creatures appeared in the dining room doorway, and those sitting inside looked around in alarm. The rebel creatures walked into the hall. One of them immediately hit the nearest prisoner in the face. Prisoners started fighting each other. Someone shouted at the troublemakers to get rid of the warden's helpers. She asked if they felt as proud of themselves as they did yesterday. Behind bars, the well-behaved prisoners begged the witch to help them and called for the warden to save them. The new girl was still sitting across from the witch, with the chaos unfolding behind her. She smiled mischievously and asked the witch to join them. She had a choice: either not cause problems for them and give up her chance to get away, or sit and enjoy the show, and then the new girl would take the witch to him. And that's the end of this episode. Like and subscribe for the next part.